Chapter 81. 100 Chi Gate, Training Peak. 3 minutes passed very quickly. Seeing Meng Fanwei forcefully suppressing his strength and his opponent's attacks becoming fiercer and fiercer, Yu Haoran knew that his opponent this round would not be Meng Fanwei. However, he did not want to let him go so easily. Thus, he began to observe the contestants who had finished their matches. Finally, he chose an opponent who was about to finish his break and was only a 9th grade martial disciple. Using Gale Steps, he instantly appeared in front of his opponent who had just finished his break. Without giving his opponent a chance to introduce himself or say a few harsh words, he relied on the speed of Gale Steps and used a basic fist technique, Soaring Fist, to knock his opponent unconscious. Then, relying on the speed of Gale Steps, he instantly returned to his previous position. This back and forth only took a short 10 seconds. In such a short time, Meng Fanwei thought that he was safe and was about to use his strongest strength to forcefully send his opponent flying. However, just as he was about to activate all his elemental energy, he saw Yu Haoran, who had just left, return. Thinking of Yu Haoran's speed and the fact that he could easily defeat Song Dongfang, Meng Fanwei knew that Yu Haoran had not only successfully advanced to the next round, he had also obtained another 3 minutes of break time. Forcefully suppressing all his elemental energy, Meng Fanwei almost vomited blood. However, in order to ensure that he could advance to a higher ranking, he could only forcefully swallow the blood that was rushing to his heart. However, the result was that his originally rosy face instantly paled a lot. Meng Fanwei's opponent, after fiercely attacking, felt that his physical strength and elemental energy were somewhat lacking, and the momentum of his attacks slowed down. However, after seeing Meng Fanwei's originally rosy face turn pale in an instant, he mistakenly thought that his attacks were somewhat difficult for him to withstand. His originally slow attacks instantly became fierce again. What made Meng Fanwei even angrier was that not only did his opponent's attacks become fiercer and fiercer, but in a state of excitement, he shouted out the first move of each move loudly. It was as if after hearing the names of those moves, he would feel fear and take the initiative to admit defeat. Fortunately, Meng Fanwei could be considered a person who knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Although the depression and anger in his heart was driving him crazy, he was still able to maintain a clear mind and continue to persevere. Another 3 minutes passed. Seeing that both sides were still evenly matched, Yu Haoran knew that Meng Fanwei wanted to continue stalling time, so he could only continue to look for suitable opponents to quickly defeat and then continue watching him. Just as Yu Haoran chose an opponent who was about to finish his break and whose cultivation was only at the peak of the 9th grade martial disciple, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Meng Yao greets senior brother. The beautiful girl standing in front of Yu Haoran called out in a melodious voice. Frowning slightly, Yu Haoran asked in an unfriendly tone, "Could it be that you want to challenge me?" Lin Meng Yao was the beautiful girl who had displayed astonishing talent, potential, perception, and perseverance in the first round of tests. She was also the genius girl that Vice Sect Master Lai Yin tried to rope in. As for Lin Meng Yao, Yu Haoran understood her even more clearly. This was because the surname Lin was only her mother's surname. Her real surname was Hua. It was the surname of one of the 9 great families in the profound sky continent that had existed for more than 100,000 years. However, Lin Meng Yao's background was not too glorious. She was the illegitimate daughter of the patriarch of the Hua family. At the same time, Yu Haoran also knew that the talent, potential, perception, and perseverance that Lin Meng Yao had displayed was only 1/10 of her own talent. This was because she had not awakened the Hua family's blazing body. The blazing body was ranked 25th among the 13,650 special physiques. It was a special physique that possessed extremely high temperatures. When Lin Meng Yao truly awakened the blazing body, she would not only become one of the top 10 beauties in the profound sky continent, but she would also return to the Hua family and become an influential figure in the profound sky continent. Of course, no matter how outstanding Lin Meng Yao's talent was, it had nothing to do with Yu Haoran. The reason why his attitude towards Lin Mingyao was so bad was because he had been hurt too deeply by this woman in his previous life. Yu Shixiang, among the disciples that the sect recruited this time, your talent, potential, perception, and perseverance all surpass mine. So I want to know if Yu Shixiang's strength truly surpasses mine. Yu Haoran's cold and indifferent attitude towards her made Lin Mingyao feel a little uncomfortable. This was because the feeling that Yu Haoran gave her was the same feeling that she had wanted to throw herself into his arms, but had been forcibly pushed away by him. He had also sternly ordered her not to reveal her other identity to him. Towards that man, her heart was filled with both respect and fear, both hatred and love. To sum it up, it was a complex feeling. In the eyes of Yu Haoran, regardless of gender, appearance, or strength, I will not show mercy, Yu Haoran coldly said. To be honest, Yu Haoran did not want to fight with Lin Mingyao right now. The reason he did not fight was not because he had any thoughts towards Lin Mingyao, but because he did not want Lin Mingyao to cause his mood to fluctuate violently and cause his bottleneck to loosen. After all, in the 100 Qi Gate, the only person who could cause such a drastic change in his mood, other than his teacher, was this woman. In Mingyao's eyes, regardless of gender, appearance, or strength, I will not show mercy. Lin Mingyao gave the same response as before. Since it's like this, let's fight. Yu Haoran inwardly sighed as he signaled. Although he did not have any thoughts in his heart, but how could he let go of the love and hatred from his previous life so easily? Therefore, he still subconsciously held back. Spring returns to the earth. After many years of being an illegitimate child, Lin Mingyao's personality was very strong, and her strong personality made her actions very decisive. Since he had already decided to fight, it did not matter who made the first move. Therefore, she directly used her most profound and most powerful palm technique. Seeing Lin Mingyao use the familiar light wind palm, Yu Haoran hesitated for a moment before finally making up his mind. He also used the light wind palm's spring returns to the earth to meet Lin Mingyao's spring returns to the earth. Seeing that Yu Haoran also knew the light wind palm, and that his comprehension of the light wind palm surpassed hers, Lin Mingyao's face couldn't help but change. Ever since she had reached adulthood, her talent stone had tested that her perception and willpower did not lose out to her talent and potential. Her father, who had never acknowledged her status, had personally helped her choose the light wind palm and told her. The light wind palm was a mysterious palm technique that had no rank. As long as one could comprehend each of the light wind palm techniques to the great perfection realm, then not only would they be able to continuously use the light wind palm technique, but they would also be able to comprehend a branch of the mysterious law force. At the same time, that person had also told her that as long as she could comprehend a branch of the mysterious law, then he would acknowledge her status and bring her into the whole clan. Therefore, Lin Mingyao had put in a lot of effort to cultivate the light wind palm and had obtained good results. Right now, her control of the light wind palm had already reached the peak of the small perfection realm, and she was only half a step away from the large perfection realm. At the same time, before the sex selection competition, that person had seen her. Other than ordering her to join the 100 Qi Gate, he had also evaluated her comprehension of the light wind palm. He had said that among the younger generation, her comprehension of the light wind palm was the best. Chapter 82. 100 Qi Gate, Training Peak, Mountain Peak. Seeing the spring returning earth palm easily disperse, Lin Mingyao, for the first time in her life, began to waver. It was as if that omniscient, omnipotent, godlike man had been slapped down from his pedestal by Yu Haoran. She couldn't help but stare blankly. Seeing Lin Mingyao suddenly fall into a daze, Yu Haoran couldn't harden his heart to injure her. Therefore, he raises his hand to release another bone-chilling palm strike. With the coldness of the bone-chilling wind, he directly neutralizes the warmth of the land of spring returning so that Zhou Mingyao, who is in a daze, won't be hit by the land of spring returning, which hasn't consumed much of its power. The two palms that had lost their power finally merged into a gentle breeze. The gentle breeze blew through Lin Mingyao's hair, making her look like a fairy in the wind. Meng Fanwei, who had been paying attention to the competition, was stunned. And as for Meng Fanwei's opponent, that disciple whose cultivation was only at the high 9th grade of martial disciple, stood there stupidly while drooling. Lin Mingyao, who had been caressed by the gentle breeze, woke up. Feeling her hair falling down, she knew that Yu Haoran had shown her mercy. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't be standing here unscathed. Thinking about how Yu Haoran's comprehension of the light wind palm was far greater than her own, she thought about how his aptitude far surpassed her own. Originally, she wanted to compete with him, but now she felt a lot less confident. Lin Mingyao stretched out her jade-like hands and brushed her hair back. She lightly laughed and said, "Many thanks to you, Shi Xiang, for showing mercy. Mingyao knows that she is not senior brother's opponent, so I admit defeat." Seeing that Lin Mingyao didn't continue to show off and even took the initiative to admit defeat, Yu Haoran secretly let out a sigh of relief. Then, he looked at Meng Fanwei. At this time, Meng Fanwei, who had regained his senses, couldn't help but shyly lower his head under Yu Haoran's gaze. He felt embarrassed for his previous loss of self-control. Soon after, he discovered that his opponent was staring at Lin Mingyao in a daze. He couldn't help but remind him, "Hey, our competition isn't over yet." Oh, many thanks, senior brother, for reminding me." The disciple who had been awakened was stunned for a moment. Then, he saw that Meng Fanwei didn't take advantage of his stupidity to launch a sneak attack. He quickly thanked him. He felt that Meng Fanwei was a straightforward and upright person, so he couldn't help but have a good impression of him. "According to cultivation, I should call you senior brother. Although I don't know why senior brother is no match for me, a 9th grade martial disciple. Even though you're a 1st grade martial warrior, senior brother can rest assured that I'll try my best to win without hurting you." "Good." Meng Fanwei, who was already depressed because of Yu Haoran's continuous pressure, could no longer suppress the anger in his heart after hearing his opponent's belittling of his good intentions. After gnashing his teeth and saying "good," he directly used all his strength and knocked his opponent unconscious with a single move. "Brat, don't let me see you again in the future. Otherwise, every time I see you, I will knock you out." Due to the restrictions of the competition, Meng Fanwei could only knock his opponent unconscious at most. He couldn't kill his opponent, nor could he seriously injure his opponent. This caused the anger in his heart to not completely dissipate. Therefore, before his opponent fainted, he fiercely threatened him. "Yu Haoran, I know that I am not your opponent. However, if you want me to obediently admit defeat, then don't even think about it." After dealing with his depressed opponent, Meng Fanwei did not use the 3 minutes of rest and directly challenged Yu Haoran. In response, Yu Haoran shrugged and said in an indifferent tone, "Up to you." Raging flames soaring heaven. Facing Yu Haoran's indifferent attitude, Meng Fanwei took a deep breath and quickly calmed himself down. He knew that Yu Haoran was very strong. If the two of them fought, victory would be decided in 1 or 2 moves. Therefore, he did not try to probe his opponent and directly used his strongest move. Wind, not only can it add fuel to fire, it can also extinguish it. Seeing that Meng Fanwei was using a fire attribute martial skill, Yu Haoran countered with a move. Using the method of attribute countering attribute, he directly used the bone-piercing cold wind palm, using cold to suppress heat and wind to extinguish the fire. Boom! The 2 palms that contained fire and cold energy collided and immediately produced a slight rumbling sound. Accompanied by a slight roar, the 2 types of invisible palm techniques that were attacking each other actually produced traces of scorching flames in the air, as well as traces of cold white light. Seeing that the power of Yu Haoran and Meng Fanwei's martial skills had reached the level of martial master, whether it was the upper echelons of the 100 Chi Gate or the disciples participating in the competition, they all looked at them in shock. In fact, not to mention the upper echelons of the 100 Chi Gate, even Meng Fanwei's face revealed an expression of shock when he saw the constantly extinguishing red and white light in the air. This was because he also did not expect that a grade 1 martial warrior's blazing sun palm could reach the level of elemental energy manifestation. However, to Yu Haoran, this phenomenon was very normal. The reason why the scorching heat and cold light could manifest as elemental energy was not because the power of the two palms had reached the martial master level, but because of the nature of the two attributes' mutual promotion and suppression. In the air, the white that was filled with cold energy and the red that was filled with scorching heat blended together, constantly devouring and strengthening each other. Although the white that was filled with cold energy was not as strong as the red that was filled with scorching heat, the white that was filled with cold energy had an absolute advantage in terms of strength and speed of devouring. 10 seconds later, the two forces that were originally evenly matched with each other, after devouring each other, only the white that was filled with cold energy was left. After the last trace of scorching heat disappeared, the white that was not affected by the mutual promotion and suppression of the two attributes also became invisible in the air. Originally, Yu Haoran thought that devouring each other would consume most of the energy of the piercing cold wind palm, and that he would need to use a second move to defeat Meng Fanwei. However, what he did not expect was that the piercing cold wind palm, after devouring a large amount of scorching heat energy, not only did it not weaken in the slightest, it actually became 10 times more powerful. In the face of such a powerful force, let alone Meng Fanwei, who was only a grade 1 martial warrior, even a grade 3 or grade 6 martial warrior would find it difficult to resist. Therefore, when he felt the piercing cold wind palm's power increase, the shock on Meng Fanwei's face was completely replaced by a pale white color. He knew that with his own strength, he would definitely not be able to resist the cold palms. It was very likely that his life and future would be lost here. In his previous life, there was not much hatred between him and Meng Fanwei. The reason he chose him as his opponent was to prevent him from challenging Wu Xingjun and affecting Wu Zhengjuan's final ranking, not to take his life. Feeling the piercing cold wind palm's power increase by more than 10 times, Yu Haoran could not help but turn his head to look at the Wu Wei Sword King, Feng Qingyan. At this moment, the only people who could easily disperse the piercing cold wind were the experts of the 100 Feet Gate. The only person who could easily disperse the piercing cold wind without any malice towards him was the Wu Wei Sword King, Feng Qingyan. Chapter 83. 100 Chi Gate, Training Peak, Mountain Peak. I admit defeat. Meng Fanwei, who had just escaped death, subconsciously took a few steps back before hurriedly admitting defeat. Although the ranking in the ranking competition would affect his final treatment, compared to his life, that treatment was insignificant. After Meng Fanwei loudly admitted defeat, the disciples who had successfully passed the 4th round and advanced to the top 100 looked at Yu Haoran with eyes full of endless fear. At this moment, their greatest wish was to not become Yu Haoran's opponent in the next few rounds of the competition. Yu Haoran cast a grateful look at Feng Qingyun, thanking him for his timely intervention. Then he turned his head and continued to look for his next opponent. Among the 5 first-grade martial warriors, only Song Fangdong and Meng Fanwei had reached the peak of first-grade martial warrior. The other 3 first-grade martial warriors were only at the early stage of first-grade martial warrior. With Wu Zhengjuan's bloodthirsty constitution and his willingness to risk his life, he could defeat them if he went all out. Furthermore, the disciples who had been able to persist until now had already successfully entered the top 100. They didn't need to worry about being demoted to odd jobs or outer disciples. Therefore, there was no need to consider Wu Zhengjuan's ranking. Therefore, Yu Haoran's gaze directly landed on the youth in black, who had an extraordinary temperament and a very arrogant demeanor. Among the nearly 600 disciples present, there weren't many who could be personally roped in by Vice Gate Master Lai Yan. Including Wu Xingjun, who had a special constitution, there were only 5 of them. Among them, other than Wu Xingjun, who had always put himself in charge, the black-clothed youth was the only one who had rejected Lai Yan and all the other higher-ups' attempts to rope him in. As for why the youth in black had rejected all the higher-ups' attempts to rope him in, the crowd had many guesses. However, only Yu Haoran knew the real reason. This was because the youth in Black's origin was related to a secret of the 100 Chi Gate, a secret that involved the gate master of the 100 Chi Gate. In his previous life, when the 100 Feet sect was exterminated, Yu Haoran would not have known about the secret between the two of them. He would rather choose the sect leader, whose soul was afraid of being destroyed, to protect the life of the black-clothed youth. At the same time, Yu Haoran found out after careful investigation that the real reason for the extermination of the 100 Feet sect was that Lai Yin and the others had provoked the Jade Mirage Palace's disciples. The real reason for the extermination of the 100 Feet sect was this black-clothed youth. Yu Haoran appeared in front of the youth in a flash and calmly looked at him. Regarding the annihilation of the 100 Chi Gate, he didn't care. He was only concerned about his master and several senior brothers who would be implicated in the destruction of the 100 Chi Gate. Therefore, he could only prevent the annihilation of the 100 Chi Gate in the future. I admit defeat. Looking at Yu Haoran in front of him, the arrogant youth in black was unconvinced and wanted to fight him. He believed that with the martial techniques taught by that person and the secret techniques that could increase his strength, Yu Haoran would definitely not be his match. However, just as he was about to reveal his trump card, that person's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. In the end, he could only admit defeat helplessly. Looking up at the 100 Chi peak in the depths of the sect, Yu Haoran didn't say anything. He just turned around and chose the next opponent to challenge. After that, as long as the opponent was chosen by Yu Haoran, none of them dared to fight him head-on. They all admitted defeat immediately. In the end, he easily became the champion of the ranking competition. The few opponents who could threaten and defeat Wu Zhengjun were all cleaned up by Yu Haoran in advance, allowing him to easily take second place in the ranking competition. As for Song Dongfeng, Meng Fanwei, the youth in black, and Lin Mengyao, who could have entered the top 10 or even top 5 because they met Yu Haoran in advance, they stopped outside the top 10. Fortunately, these people performed outstandingly in the aptitude test. In addition, Lai Yin and the other higher-ups of the sect took special care of them. Their final rankings were not bad. When the final rankings were out, the entire trial peak suddenly quieted down. Moreover, everyone's gaze turned towards Yu Haoran. They were paying attention to Yu Haoran because not only was he the double champion of the sect's internal test and the ranking competition, but he also hadn't indicated his final destination. Taking a deep breath and adjusting his emotions, Yu Haoran finally calmly walked towards Feng Qingyun, towards his benefactor who treated him like his own father in his previous life. Seeing Yu Haoran's actions, Wu Zhengjun didn't hesitate and followed half a body's distance away. Junior Yu Haoran greets Senior Feng. Walking in front of Feng Qingyun, Yu Haoran respectfully bowed. Junior Wu Zhengjun greets Senior Feng. The same action, the same attitude, Wu Zhengjun also bowed. Yu Haoran, Wu Zhengjun, I'm just an ordinary peak master of the 100 Chi Gate. I have no strength, and my realm is also very ordinary. Are you willing to take me as your master? Looking at Yu Haoran and Wu Zhengjun, who respectfully bowed, Feng Qingyun's originally gentle attitude suddenly became serious, and he belittled himself as he tested them. I am willing. Yu Haoran resolutely replied. I'm also willing. Wu Zhengjun echoed. After hearing Yu Haoran and Wu Zhengjun's resolute reply, Feng Qingyun hurriedly ordered, since that is the case, then follow me back to Qingyun Peak, and under the witness of the ancestors' memorial tablets, you can take me as your master. Then he raised his head and looked straight at Lai Yin, his voice indifferent. Senior brother Lai Yin, regarding the identity tokens of my 2 disciples, as well as the reception after entering the sect, I will arrange for my eldest disciple, Chu Zhongyu, to handle it. No problem. Lai Yin didn't have the slightest intention of making things difficult for Feng Qingyun's request, and readily agreed. The reason why Lai Yin agreed so readily was because Feng Qingyun was in the 100 Feet Gate. He didn't fight for power or profit, so there was no conflict of interest with him. Therefore, there was no conflict. Secondly, although Feng Qingyun's cultivation was only at the peak of the Martial King realm, he was very mysterious in the sect, giving people a feeling that they couldn't see through him and couldn't touch him. Thirdly, with Yu Haoran, a disciple with monstrous talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance, and Wu Zhongjun, a peerless genius with a special physique, the future potential of Qingyun Peak could not be underestimated. Under such circumstances, Lai Yin didn't want to offend Feng Qingyun. What's more, the identity and treatment of the disciples were obtained by Yu Haoran and Wu Zhongjun through their own efforts. This was not only the rule of the sect, but also a practice that had been followed for thousands of years. He couldn't blatantly break it. As he followed Feng Qingyun out of the trial peak, Yu Haoran couldn't help but turn his head to look at Lin Mengyao and found that she was also looking at him. Chapter 84. This wasn't the first time it was published, so Yin didn't write any words of gratitude, requests, complaints, or a top-up. She simply explained the update plan after it was published. According to the usual practice, on the first day, there would be 10 chapters and more than 20,000 words. In the future, there would be 5 basic chapters and more than 10,000 words every day. The update time would be from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. As for the extra chapters, it would depend on the situation. After all, those who were familiar with and understood Yin knew that Yin was a part-time writer. Although her writing speed was good, she didn't have enough time. 5 chapters and more than 10,000 words were guaranteed, but more required passion and time. Chapter 85. Qingyun Peak, halfway up the mountain, in a courtyard with a beautiful scenery. Looking at the courtyard in front of him that was not inferior to Jingya Pavilion in the slightest, and had 10 times more dense spirit qi, Yu Haoran's face revealed a trace of satisfaction. This courtyard was called Hidden Moon Pavilion. After he became Feng Qingyun's disciple, senior brother Chu Zhongyu personally assigned it to him. In his previous life, the courtyard he lived in on Qingyun Peak was precisely this Hidden Moon Pavilion. Therefore, although the sex test and ranking competition had undergone earth-shattering changes compared to his previous life, after returning to the sect, everything seemed to have returned to its original trajectory. This made him feel satisfied and gratified. After standing in the courtyard for half an hour, Yu Haoran's mood had completely calmed down. He walked towards the cultivation room of the Hidden Moon Pavilion, intending to use this opportunity to break through to the martial warrior realm. Although he won the qualification test and ranking competition and obtained the status of an inner disciple, as well as the treatment of an elite disciple, if he wanted to keep this status and treatment, he needed to have the corresponding strength. With his current aptitude and potential, as long as he broke through to the martial warrior realm, he would be able to directly challenge a 4th-grade martial warrior or even a 5th-grade martial warrior. If that was the case, those who were jealous of his status and treatment would have nothing to say. Yu Haoran sat cross-legged on the futon in the cultivation room and took out the last foundation elixir that he had refined. He also took out 3 9th-grade, 3rd-grade spirit stones. Yu Haoran planned to use these elixirs and spirit stones to break through to the martial warrior realm. Just as Yu Haoran was about to put the Peiyuan pill into his mouth, Fowling in his sea of consciousness suddenly stopped him. Yu Haoran, wait a moment. What's wrong? Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. Yu Haoran, use inner vision to observe your Dantian. Without explaining the reason for stopping him from breaking through to the martial warrior realm, Fowling indicated for Yu Haoran to check his Dantian. Through meditation and inner vision, Yu Haoran carefully felt his Dantian in his lower abdomen. At this time, Fowling had already removed the restriction formed by the origin energy, allowing him to clearly feel every change in his Dantian. Fowling, what's going on? Looking at his Dantian that had expanded by 3 times, Yu Haoran asked in surprise. Because he had the experience of being a peak martial king in his previous life, as well as the importance he placed on his foundation, the capacity of his Dantian was many times larger than that of an ordinary martial artist. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to have the strength of an early 3rd-grade martial warrior with a peak 9th-grade martial disciple cultivation. However, the capacity of his Dantian was now 3 times the original capacity of his Dantian. It was more than 10 times the capacity of an ordinary warrior's Dantian. Moreover, He did not consume any treasures of heaven and earth, nor did he cultivate any secret technique to expand his dantian. Facing this situation, how could he not be puzzled? Yu Haoran, there has always been a legend in the profound sky continent. It is said that the limit of every major realm is not the 9th realm, but the perfect 10th realm. However, no one has ever succeeded in cultivating it. Even the peerless genius who has the potential to become a formless martial god could not break through the perfect 10th realm. Thaling, who had already prepared to tell him everything, explained in detail. Thaling, are you trying to say that with my current state, I can break through to the 10th grade? After hearing Thaling's explanation, Yu Haoran was not the least bit surprised. Instead, he asked with a hint of self-mockery. Putting aside the memories of his previous life, his aptitude was at most that of a top genius. Even Wu Jingjun, who had a special constitution, could not compare to him. Then, what ability did he have to break through to the 10th grade? Even those with the potential to become martial gods could not break through to the 10th grade. Yu Haoran, I never thought that you could break through to the 10th grade. However, your current state and the capacity of your dantian are very similar to the rumor of someone about to break through to the 10th grade. Therefore, I hope that you can give it a try. Thaling understood the self-mockery in Yu Haoran's tone. However, he sincerely hoped that Yu Haoran could give it a try. If Yu Haoran really broke through to the 10th grade, then not only would his chances of breaking through to the martial god realm increase, but he would also have a chance to break through to the legendary realm. If Yu Haoran could really reach the legendary realm, then his fate would also undergo a heaven-defying change. The consequences of failing to break through. Facing Thaling's request, Yu Haoran did not immediately refuse. In his heart, he also had a desire to try to break through to the 10th grade. However, before that, he needed to know what kind of consequences he would have to bear if he failed to break through. If you fail to break through, just like when you suppress your cultivation for the 3rd time, it will make the bottleneck of the martial warrior realm even more firm. At that time, you'll need to use some top-quality spirit dawn to break through to the martial warrior realm. Without hiding anything, Thaling spoke the truth. How do I break through? The consequences would only be delaying his breakthrough to the martial warrior realm. Hearing about the consequences of failing to break through to the 10th grade, Yu Haoran couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. As long as he didn't become crippled or go berserk, he could accept and bear the consequences of delaying his breakthrough. Moreover, regardless of whether he broke through or not, he would have to go to the 100 Chi Gates mountain range to fight for the top-quality spirit dawn that were more than 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng. With the help of that spirit dawn, he would not have to delay his breakthrough to the martial warrior realm. Breaking through to the 10th grade is very simple. You only need to continuously fill your dantian with spirit dawn. When the amount of spirit dawn in your dantian reaches its limit, you will know whether or not you can break through to the 10th grade. As for how to break through to the 10th grade, Thaling also didn't know much about it. Therefore, he could only use the characteristics of his spirit dawn and his millions of years of experience to deduce the method. All right, as long as he filled his dantian with spirit dawn, Yu Haoran secretly let out a sigh of relief when he heard the conditions for breaking through to the 10th grade. However, he couldn't help but frown. A spirit cultivating Dan and 3 9th grade, 3rd grade spirit stones were the energy he needed to break through to the martial warrior realm. Logically speaking, the amount of Peiyuan pills and spirit stones should be enough to meet the energy needed to break through to the 10th grade of martial disciple. However, the 10th grade was a legendary realm. No one knew how much energy was needed to break through to this realm. Therefore, before breaking through, he must prepare enough energy. Thinking of this, Yu Haoran got up and left the cultivation room. He left the Hidden Moon Pavilion and went straight to the Qingyun Peaks Qingju Pavilion. The Qingju Pavilion was Chu Zhongyu's courtyard. Chu Zhongyu had always been on behalf of him as a disciple and received the treatment of an inner disciple. In the treatment of an inner disciple, other than the necessary qi refining Dan, qi returning Dan, and spirit cultivating Dan, there is also a certain amount of spirit stones. Chapter 86. Qingyan Peak, Qingzhou Pavilion. The size of Qingzhou Pavilion, the style of the building, the beauty of the environment, and the density of the spiritual qi were similar to that of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. This was Feng Qingyun's principle. Everyone should be treated fairly. As for what kind of achievements they could achieve, it all depended on their own efforts and opportunities. This was also one of the important reasons why the disciples of Qingyan Peak were united and friendly. When Yu Haoran arrived at Qingzhou Pavilion, he was surprised to find that all the disciples of his master's faction, including Wu Jingjun, were there. They were different from the other factions. In the 100 Qi Gate, Feng Qingyun's personality was indifferent. He liked to be quiet and did not fight for power with his fellow disciples. He also did not participate in the affairs of the sect. Therefore, not only was his faction not famous, but they also had very few disciples. Including him and Wu Jingjun, the two new disciples, Feng Qingyun's faction only had 10 disciples. Eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu was 33 years old this year. He had the aptitude of a peak martial king and the cultivation of a 9th grade martial great master. Recently, he had been trying to break through to the martial king realm, but the results were not obvious. Second senior brother Lu Guangwei was 40 years old this year. He was a thin, middle-aged man with the aptitude of a peak martial king and the cultivation of a 1st grade martial great master. Originally, second senior brother was Feng Qingyun's servant before he entered the 100 Qi Gate. Because Feng Qingyun's aptitude was outstanding, the previous peak master of Qingyan Peak also thought highly of him. Therefore, he made an exception and allowed Lu Guangwei to enter Qingyan Peak. However, his identity followed the rules of the 100 Qi Gate. From a martial disciple to an outer disciple to a martial warrior, then to an inner disciple to a martial master. He waited until Feng Qingyun's cultivation broke through to the martial king realm. Furthermore, Qingyan Peak met with an unforeseen event, and Feng Qingyun took over before he became Feng Qingyun's disciple. Therefore, at the age of 40, he bowed down to Chu Zhongyu and became second senior brother. The third senior brother, Dong Mingyu, was 31 years old. He had the aptitude of a middle-stage martial king and the cultivation of an early-stage 7th grade martial great master. He had joined Feng Qingyun at the same time as the eldest senior brother and the second senior brother. He was an honest person who was not good with words. Fourth senior brother Qingyun was 27 years old this year. He had the aptitude of a peak martial king and the cultivation of an early 3rd grade martial arts great master. He was very easygoing and did not have the arrogance of a senior brother. Furthermore, he was the one who helped to arrange the courtyard for Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun. The fifth senior brother, Huang Zonghua, was 25 years old this year. He had the aptitude of a peak martial king and the cultivation of a 1st grade martial arts grandmaster. He had a very lively personality. Back then, he had taken the initiative to follow Chu Zhongyu to Pingyang City to participate in the sect preliminaries. Sixth senior brother Pan Yuhai was the same age and talent as fifth senior brother Huang Zonghua. They were both disciples of Feng Qingyun and had just broken through to the martial ancestor realm. Currently, they were trying their best to consolidate their cultivation. Seventh senior brother, Xiaonan, was 22 years old this year. He had the aptitude of a peak martial king and the cultivation of a peak 7th grade martial master. His personality was the same as eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu. He was kind, warm-hearted, and helpful. The only difference was that Xiaonan was only helpful to the disciples of Qingyun's faction. He was not as friendly to the other disciples of the 100 Qi Gate. Eighth senior brother, Lin Xian, was the disciple with the highest aptitude in Feng Qingyun's faction. He was only 19 years old this year. He was already a peak 8th grade martial master and had the potential to become a beginner martial sage. At the same time, Lin Xian was different from the other 7 senior brothers. He gave people a feeling that he was very arrogant and looked down on those who were not as talented as him. Therefore, among the 8 senior brothers, his relationship with the other 7 senior brothers could only be considered average. In fact, Yu Haoran knew that the other 7 senior brothers had misunderstood 8th senior brother Lin Xian. Because of his background and the humiliation he experienced in his youth, Lin Xian's personality was too inferior and lacking in self-confidence. Therefore, he used his arrogance to cover up his inferiority complex, giving people the feeling that he was looking down on others. More importantly, Yu Haoran knew that Lin Xian's aptitude was not that of a top genius. The aptitude of a beginner martial sage was not the true limit. This was because Lin Xian was the same as Wu Zhengjun. He also had a special constitution. Unfortunately, when he truly activated his special constitution, it was when the 100 Qi sect was exterminated and Qingyun Peak was besieged. In order to help his master lessen the pressure of being besieged, he, with his peak 7th grade Martial King cultivation, directly killed 3 peak 9th grade Martial King experts. In the end, at the moment of life and death, he successfully activated his special constitution, giving him an even more powerful strength. Unfortunately, even though he successfully killed the 3 peak 9th grade Martial King experts, his heart meridians were shattered by the 3 peak 9th grade Martial King experts' strongest attacks before they died. In the end, he died miserably on the Qingyun Peak. 9th junior brother, you're here. Seeing Yu Haoran walk into Qingju Pavilion, as the owner of Qingju Pavilion, Chu Zhongyu, stood up and greeted him with a smile. Yu Haoran greets senior brothers. Yu Haoran greeted them with a smile. Yu Shixiao, Wu Zhengjun, who had been in Qingju Pavilion for a long time, also stood up and saluted. Nodding at Wu Zhengjun, Yu Haoran did not stand on ceremony with his senior brothers. He directly sat down on a stone chair in the pavilion and said, "Senior brother, what's the matter? You're all here." After looking at each other, Chu Zhongyu explained with a frown. "I don't know if the people from the Achievement Hall made a mistake, or if Vicehead Lai was too kind, but this time, not only was the disciples' benefits not deducted, they even made up for all the benefits owed over the years in one go. That's normal." After hearing the reason for the senior brothers' gathering, Yu Haoran said with a smile, "Senior brothers, junior brothers' following words might hurt the self-esteem of some of you senior brothers. Junior brother apologizes to you first." Before explaining the real reason, Yu Haoran first apologized. "It's okay, 9th junior brother can say it." Other than Lin Xian, who had a cold temperament, the other 7 senior brothers all shook their heads, indicating that they did not care. Actually, the reason is very simple. It's because our Qingyun Peak now has unlimited possibilities. At this point, Yu Haoran pointed at Chu Zhongyu and said, "First of all, senior brother is already at the peak of Martial Grandmaster 9th grade. He can break through to the Martial King realm at any time. In that case, our Qingyun Peak has 2 Martial King experts. 9 junior brother, it's not that easy to break through to the Martial King realm. If I don't have a heaven-defying opportunity, I'll need at least 3 years to break through to the Martial King realm." Chu Zhongyu objectively analyzed himself. Yu Haoran did not have any reaction to Chu Zhongyu's self-analysis. This was because he knew that his senior brother's analysis was both correct and incorrect. Yes, it was because in his previous life he had indeed spent nearly 3 years to successfully break through to the Martial King realm. No, it was because he knew the real reason why his senior brother was unable to break through to the Martial King realm. It was because he had given himself too much unnecessary pressure. It was because of this pressure that he was unable to break through to the Martial King realm. He had to wait until his 8th senior brother Lin Xian broke through to the Martial King realm to relieve himself of the pressure, allowing him to find the opportunity to break through. Chapter 87. Qingyun Peak, Qingju Pavilion. Secondly, the aptitude that 8th senior brother, junior brother Wu, and I have shown, as well as our unpredictable future achievements, is probably one of the reasons why Vice Sect Leader Lai is afraid. Regarding this point of analysis, the 7 senior brothers present not only did not have the slightest dissatisfaction, instead, they all nodded in agreement. After all, they had seen the impact of aptitude on cultivation from Lin Xian. They knew that Yu Haoran and Wu Zhengjun, who had more outstanding aptitude and potential, would break through to the Martial King realm earlier than them. Their future achievements would definitely be higher than theirs. Lastly, and also the most important point, among the 36 factions of the 100 Chi Gate, we, Qingyan Peak, have the least number of people, but we are the most united. We can think of the same thing and exert our efforts in the same direction. With eldest senior brother, who is about to break through to the Martial King realm, and us three peerless geniuses with limitless futures, as well as our determination to unite and fight against the enemy, even the sect master and the Council of Founding Elders have to be wary of us, let alone Vice Sect Master Lai. Chapter 88. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. When all that was left in front of him was the last bottle of 10th grade, 9th rank energy cultivating pills and the 9th rank 3rd rank spirit stones he had obtained from his family's treasury, Yuhaoran finally experienced the feeling of being suppressed in terms of cultivation level. This feeling of being suppressed was different from the suppression of the martial warrior realm. It was a kind of suppression that he had never encountered in his previous life. Moreover, this suppression contained a trace of destructive power. This trace of destructive power was very similar to the destructive power that was produced when the demon god's tomb exploded. Feeling the suppression of the bottleneck, Yuhaoran couldn't help but feel happy in his heart. In order to be able to feel the bottleneck of this realm, he used up all the resources from his family and sect. If he didn't feel the bottleneck of the new realm in the end, then he would have the heart to die. After consuming so many pills and spirit stones, he barely felt the bottleneck of the new realm. Then, if he wanted to break through the bottleneck of the new realm, how much cultivation resources would he need? Looking at the last bottle of pills on the ground and the 5 9th grade, 3rd grade spirit stones he obtained from his family's treasury, he couldn't help but sigh. The resources in front of him were not enough to support him to break through to the 10th grade martial disciple realm. Therefore, he planned to temporarily leave the Hidden Moon Pavilion and go to the undeveloped mountain peak to find the elixir that was 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng. Then, with the help of that elixir, he would try to break through to the 10th grade martial disciple realm. However, just as he was about to end his cultivation and get up to leave the cultivation room, Thowling suddenly spoke in his sea of consciousness. Yuhaoran, I will use my origin energy and convert it into spirit energy to help you. Thowling, there is no need. I know that there is an elixir that is 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng hidden somewhere. I think that the energy contained in that elixir can help me break through to the 10th grade martial disciple realm. Hearing that Thowling did not hesitate to use the power of the origin to help him break through to the 10th grade martial disciple realm, Yuhaoran was touched and shook his head to refuse. Back then, in order to help Yusiki recover her cultivation, Thowling had used 3 strands of the original power. Presumably, half of the blood ginseng's energy was not enough to make up for the 3 strands of the original power. In the following period of time, he helped her in every way possible. He even used the power of the origin to help her suppress the fluctuations in her mind. Therefore, Yuhaoran did not want him to consume too much of his origin energy, lest it affect his injuries and foundation. Yuhaoran, the 10th grade martial disciple realm, is, after all, a legendary realm. Now that you can feel the bottleneck of this realm, it can be said to be a heaven-defying opportunity. If I give up the opportunity to break through now, I'm worried that there will be some unpredictable variables. Although he understood Yuhaoran's reason for refusing, Thowling hoped that he could seize this opportunity to break through to the 10th perfection realm. As long as Yuhaoran could successfully break through to the 10th grade of martial disciple, not to mention consuming a strand of origin energy, even if it consumed 10 strands of origin energy, he would not hesitate. Okay, Thowling's persuasion also made Yuhaoran feel the importance of this matter. At the same time, he also understood that even if he eventually needed Thowling's origin energy, at worst, he would give the elixir that was 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng to Thowling for free. Presumably, with the vitality contained in the elixir, it would be enough to make up for the consumption of his origin energy during this period of time. Fouling, I'm going to start breaking through. The speed of absorbing spiritual chi from the spirit stones was too slow. In order to be able to truly exert the huge power contained in the spirit stones, Yu Haoran used the reckless bull fist technique and then fiercely smashed the remaining 5 spirit stones in front of him. Boom! As the 5 spirit stones were smashed, a visible spiritual chi filled the cultivation room. Without the slightest delay, Yu Haoran activated the Great Mystery Heart Sutra and crazily absorbed the dense spiritual energy from the 5 ninth grade, 3rd grade spirit stones. At the same time, he borrowed the medicinal efficacy of the essence cultivating pill to break through the bottleneck of a new realm. 1 gap, 2 gaps, 3 gaps. With the help of the remaining bottle of Peiyuan pill and the 5 shattered spirit stones, he successively broke through 3 gaps in the bottleneck of the new realm. However, 3 gaps were not enough to break through the bottleneck, so he could only ask for help from Fouling. Fouling, receive spiritual chi. The tower spirit, who was already prepared, reminded Yu Haoran. Then, a wave of spiritual energy that made one's heart tremble was transmitted from the tower spirit. Then, it passed through Yu Haoran's sea of consciousness and directly entered his dantian. The huge amount of spiritual chi that penetrated into his dantian was like a flood, causing the originally solid bottleneck to begin to crack and gradually loosen. 30 seconds later, with nearly half of the cracks broken through the bottleneck, it finally could not withstand the impact of the flood-like spiritual chi and finally completely broke through. Boom! With the breakthrough of the bottleneck, a momentum that was 10 times stronger than that of the martial warrior realm quickly rose from Yu Haoran's body. Fouling, who had long been prepared, waved his hand and directly helped him conceal the movement caused by the breakthrough of the realm. After waiting for the momentum to recede, Yu Haoran did not open his eyes. Instead, he closed them and carefully felt the changes in his body after the breakthrough. The first was the increase in strength. Different from what he had guessed, the peak of the 10th grade martial disciple realm not only allowed his strength to cross the 4th grade martial warrior realm, but also directly reach the early 5th grade martial warrior realm. The second was the change in the realm. After breaking through the peak of the 10th grade martial disciple realm, he found that the bottleneck of the martial warrior realm was like a thin piece of paper in front of him. He only needed to stretch out his finger, and he could easily enter the martial warrior realm. The last was the change in perception. Because he did not have a talent stone, he could not accurately measure his talent, potential, perception, and perseverance. However, he had a feeling in his heart that the 4 indicators of his body had undergone earth-shattering changes. Seeing that Yu Haoran opened his eyes, Fouling, who had been waiting, asked with a somewhat excited tone, "Yu Haoran, how do you feel?" "Good, very good, very good." Without explaining in detail how he felt after the breakthrough, Yu Haoran only excitedly said good 3 times in a row to show the strength of the peak of the 10th grade martial disciple realm. "That's good." After receiving Yu Haoran's reply, Fouling also excitedly cheered, and at the same time, a trace of pride rose in his heart. After all, Yu Haoran was able to break through to the peak of the 10th grade martial disciple realm because of his own nurturing and help. In the future, no matter how high Yu Haoran's achievements were, at least half of the credit would belong to him. Fouling, next I will go to the unexplored mountain range of the sect and look for a spirit herb that is 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng. It is almost at the 8th grade. Perhaps it was because of Fouling's selfless help, but Yu Haoran felt that it would be best to tell him about some of his future actions, so as to get closer to him. What kind of spirit herb is it? Hearing Yu Haoran mention finding a spirit herb, he remembered that before Yu Haoran broke through, he once said that there was a spirit herb that was 10 times more precious than the blood ginseng. He immediately became interested. Chapter 89. Qingyan Peak, at the foot of the mountain. 9 Junior Brother, where are you going? Just as Yu Haoran arrived at the foot of the mountain, he bumped into his 5th senior brother, Huang Zonghua. 5th senior brother, I have some personal matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. After replying to Huang Zonghua, Yu Haoran quickly disappeared from his line of sight using the Gale steps. This 9 junior brother is still so impatient, Huang Zonghua said with a smile as he watched Yu Haoran leave in a hurry. Then, he suddenly frowned and stared at Yu Haoran, who had already disappeared. He suddenly remembered that when he first saw Yu Haoran gave him a very strange feeling. This feeling was that even though Yu Haoran was not a martial warrior, he still gave him a sense of danger. Could it be that my realm has not been completely stabilized, so my eyes are hallucinating? Thinking that Yu Haoran was a new disciple who had just entered the sect and was only at the peak of the 9th grade martial disciple, while he himself was a martial ancestor, how could he give him a sense of danger? Huang Zonghua immediately shook his head and comforted himself with a bitter smile. In the mountain range, the reason why he was in such a hurry to find and fight over the spiritual medicine was because the spiritual medicine was about to mature. According to the memories of his previous life, when the spiritual medicine was about to mature, the medicinal fragrance emitted by the spiritual medicine and the 2 strange beasts fighting over it attracted the attention of the sect's experts. In the end, not only did the peak martial king experts fight over it, but even the martial emperor experts also fought over it. According to what he learned after the incident, the spiritual medicine was taken away by the martial emperor gatemaster and given to the black-clothed youth. It was also because of that spiritual medicine that the black-clothed youth completely widened the gap between him and the new disciples, becoming the number 1 genius of the 100 Chi Gate. It was also one of the hidden dangers of the 100 Chi Gate's destruction in the future. Relying on the memories of his previous life and the speed of the Gale Steps, Yu Haoran quickly rushed to the mountain peak. In his previous life, after the battle over the spiritual medicine, he had been arranged by his master to go to the place where the spiritual medicine grew. This was because the moment the spirit medicine was about to mature, it would gather and devour a large amount of heaven and earth spirit chi. However, it was impossible for the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to be completely absorbed by the spiritual herbs. Therefore, in a short period of time, there would be a small amount of pure spiritual chi remaining where the spiritual herbs lived. With the help of the remaining spiritual energy at that time, he directly rose from the middle of the 2nd grade to the peak of the 3rd grade. In a mountain range where the 100 Chi Gate was located, although a large part of the mountain range had not been developed, when a sect decided to establish a sect here, they had driven away the strange beasts in the mountain range. Although the operation to expel them had failed in the end, they had reached an agreement with a few 5th-level exotic beasts in the depths of the mountain range that were comparable to peak martial emperors. As long as the people of the 100 Chi Gate didn't enter the depths of the mountain range, the peak 5th-rank Emperor Realm beasts would restrain their beasts from attacking the 100 Chi Gate. As for the mountain peak where the elixir grew, it was within the agreed safe zone. Therefore, Yu Haoran, who did not have the slightest scruple, quickly arrived at the foot of the mountain peak safely. Yu Haoran looked at the mountain peak that was less than 1,000 meters tall. The environment and spiritual chi were ordinary. He took a deep breath and climbed up with all his might. The location where the spiritual herbs grew was neither at the top of the mountain nor halfway up the mountain. Instead, it was at the edge of a cliff at the back of the mountain. After climbing up the mountain with many twists and turns, Yu Haoran successfully arrived at the bottom of the cliff. Raising his head to look at the bare cliff, Yu Haoran carefully identified the exact location. After that, he found a secluded cave and hid for the time being. Spiritual herbs were born from the essence of heaven and earth. They contain an astonishing amount of energy. Every rank spiritual herb would have a strange beast guarding it during its growth. To put it bluntly, the strange beast guarding it was a strange beast that had accidentally discovered a spiritual herb that could increase its rank and bloodline. It had been guarding it all this time, waiting for the herb to mature and enjoy it alone. Back when they were fighting for the blood ginseng, one of the 4 9th-level strange beasts was the strange beast guarding the blood ginseng. However, when faced with 3 strange beasts of the same rank, it changed from guarding to fighting for the herb in the end. Since even the blood ginseng was guarded by a rank 9 strange beast, the strange beast guarding the blood ginseng, which was dozens of times more precious than the blood ginseng, would be even stronger. Since Yu Haoran knew there was a strange beast guarding the blood ginseng, and it was a rank 8 strange beast at that, he dared to come here recklessly because he knew that at the last moment before the blood ginseng matured, there would be another rank 8 strange beast that wasn't any weaker than the strange beast guarding the blood ginseng. Not only that, the two strange beasts would fight to the death when the blood ginseng matured, eventually perishing together. This was also why he dared to take the risk and come here. It didn't take long. Just as Yu Haoran finished hiding himself, a series of rumbling footsteps came from the bottom of the mountain. The footsteps shook the entire mountain range. Accompanied by the rumbling footsteps, a huge strange beast over 10 meters tall and 15 meters long approached the bare cliff step by step. Seeing the strange beast appear at the edge of the cliff, Thowling couldn't help but exclaim in his sea of consciousness. Peak rank 8 9th level strange beast, sky-pulling elephant. Kid, what kind of spiritual ginseng is hidden at the edge of the cliff? It actually attracted the sky-pulling elephant, which contains the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant. Although he didn't understand why Thowling was so interested in the sky-pulling elephant, he didn't ask too much. Instead, he pointed to the bare cliff and said, "See for yourself." Following the appearance of the heavenly elephant, a peak Class 8 or Class 9 exotic beast, the originally bare cliff actually began to slide. As the cliff slid, a cave about a meter tall and half a meter deep appeared at the edge of the cliff. Looking at the sliding cliff, Thowling, who didn't have to see the appearance of the strange beast, exclaimed again, "Peak rank 8 9th level strange beast, sky-devouring snake." At the same time, he finally understood why he didn't discover the existence of the cave or the spiritual ginseng when he used his divine sense to check the mountain peak. The reason was that the smooth skin of the sky-devouring snake had the innate ability to block divine sense. It really is it. After seeing the spiritual ginseng, which was about 20 centimeters tall and had a simple gray color, Thowling's face revealed an expression that was as expected. Taking a deep breath, Thowling excitedly shouted to Yu Haoran, "Yu Haoran, you must take it and give me a part of it." Yu Haoran didn't refute this, because when Thowling used his origin energy to help him break through to the martial disciple 10th grade, he had already decided to give this spiritual ginseng to Thowling so that it could help him heal. Therefore, even if Thowling didn't take the initiative to mention it, after picking the spiritual ginseng, he would have taken the initiative to give it to him. Looking at the silent Yu Haoran, Thowling's tone was somewhat displeased as he questioned Yu Haoran. "You can't be thinking of taking this spiritual ginseng for yourself, right?" After all, he had been putting in a lot of effort to help Yu Haoran, and even used his origin energy. Now, just a rank 8 first grade spiritual ginseng was enough to make him want to take it for himself. Thowling was angry, but also a little disappointed. "Thowling, actually, this spiritual ginseng was prepared for you." Chuckling, Yu Haoran replied, "Really?" Thowling asked in disbelief. One had to know that this spiritual ginseng was no ordinary spiritual ginseng. Although it was only a rank 8 first grade spiritual ginseng, its true value was probably comparable to a rank 7 first grade spiritual ginseng. "Of course it's true." Nodding, Yu Haoran confirmed. "Yu Haoran, do you not know the origin of this spiritual ginseng?" After receiving Yu Haoran's confirmation, Thowling still found it hard to accept. However, if Yu Haoran didn't know the true origin of this spiritual ginseng, then it was understandable that he would give it to him. Chapter 90. In the mountains, the Tianxian continent has 3 special types of ginseng. They're the sky ginseng, the earth ginseng, and the blood ginseng. These 3 types of ginseng contain a huge amount of life energy. Among them, the energy contained in the blood ginseng, in addition to increasing one's potential and life energy, can also greatly increase one's strength in the martial disciple realm. The energy contained in the sky ginseng is targeted at the soul. In addition to increasing one's potential and life energy like the blood ginseng, it can also help martial artists break through to the martial ancestor realm and increase their chances of understanding the power of laws. The earth ginseng is between the sky ginseng and the blood ginseng. It is the most special type of ginseng among the 3 types of ginseng, because the energy contained in the earth ginseng, in addition to increasing one's potential and life energy, is targeted at the physical body in Yuan Li. It can continuously help martial artists break through to the martial warrior and martial master realms. Yu Haoran's attitude was clear as he explained the origins and uses of the earth ginseng in detail. He was willing to give the earth ginseng to Thaling. That's all. Thaling asked after hearing Yu Haoran's introduction of the earth ginseng. That's all. Yu Haoran said, nodding his head. Yu Haoran, according to your explanation, the earth ginseng is mainly targeted at the martial warrior and martial master realms. Then why would Ba Tianxiang and Sky Devouring Snake, who have the bloodline of ancient beasts and are at the peak of the 8th level and 9th level, want the earth ginseng? Seeing that Yu Haoran's understanding of the earth ginseng was not comprehensive, Thaling decided to tell Yu Haoran the true use of the earth ginseng in order to prevent Yu Haoran from regretting it. Yu Haoran was suddenly at a loss for words. To tell the truth, regarding the uses of the blood ginseng, earth ginseng, and sky ginseng, he had learned of them from the records of the sacred land of alchemists, Medicine King's Valley. The records on the sky ginseng, earth ginseng, and blood ginseng were very comprehensive. He had never thought that the earth ginseng would have other uses. But as Thaling said, if the effects of the earth ginseng were only those recorded in the records, then why would beasts at the peak of the 8th level and 9th level fight to the death over the earth ginseng? Yu Haoran, do you know the origin of the special constitution? Isn't it born? Yu Haoran asked, was confused. That's right, the special physique is indeed innate. But how can one activate the special physique? How can one activate it? How can one increase the power of the special physique? Facing Thaling's question, Yu Haoran's face, Yu Haoran knew that he didn't know. Of the earth, of the body of the special of the blood. Earth, 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 earth. Earth, earth. Earth, 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 the earth of the earth, 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 blood of the blood of the earth, blood, to purify bloods. Earth, earth, of the impurities, impurities. Of the bloods of the earth, of bloods, the IMS bloods, the purify, of the blood of this. It's true. Yu Haoran almost cried out in excitement when he heard Thaling mention the effects of the earth ginseng. The earth ginseng could actually activate the special constitution. Whether it was Yu Siki and Wu Jingjun in this life, or the geniuses with special constitutions he met in his previous life, he had always envied and looked forward to the increase in talent and strength brought about by the special constitution. However, he had experienced life and death situations more than once, and had also practiced the secret method of activating the special constitution more than once. But in the end, he had achieved nothing, causing him to give up. So, after his rebirth, he had never thought of activating the special constitution. Now that he had obtained the earth ginseng, the best spiritual medicine for activating the special constitution, how could he not be excited? How could he not desire it? That's right. Thaling of the victor nodded, then continued. Actually, activating the special constitution is only one of the earth ginseng's abilities. Its true effect is to increase the purity of the bloodline, allowing the martial artist's bloodline to revert to the bloodline of the ancient gods, and allowing the bloodline of the mutated beasts to reappear the bloodline of the ancient divine beasts. The bloodline of the ancient gods. Yu Haoran asked in confusion when Thaling mentioned the ancient gods. The ancient gods were too distant from the present, so you don't need to know too much about them for now. Thaling replied with a question after casually replying. Yu Haoran, are you still willing to give me the earth ginseng now? Of course. Yu Haoran nodded in confirmation without much consideration. Although the earth ginseng was very precious, Yu Haoran was a person who kept his promises, whether it was in his previous life or in this life. Since he had already agreed to give the earth ginseng, he would not change his mind. However, if Thaling was willing to give him a portion of the earth ginseng, he would not refuse. So he needed to know how much earth ginseng was needed to activate the special constitution. Thaling, how much earth ginseng is needed to activate the special constitution in the bloodline? Only 1/10 of the earth ginseng. Fowling replied with a smile that was not a smile. Touching his nose, Yu Haoran asked somewhat embarrassedly, Fowling, can you give me 1/10 of the earth ginseng? Huh? It was rare to see Yu Haoran, whose skin was as thick as a city wall, embarrassed. Fowling laughed a few times and said, Yu Haoran, I need a spiritual medicine that contains life force as a primer to heal my injuries, so I only need half of the earth ginseng. That's good. Hearing that Fowling only needed half of the earth ginseng, Yu Haoran was delighted, but he still agreed somewhat embarrassedly. Boom! Just as Yu Haoran and Fowling were discussing the effects of the earth ginseng, a deafening roar not only caused Yu Haoran's ears to ring, but even the hidden cave was in danger of collapsing. Yu Haoran did not care about this. What he really cared about was whether the commotion caused by the fight between the two strange beasts would attract the attention of the sect experts. He was worried that the fragrance of the earth ginseng that was about to ripen would attract the sect experts. Therefore, he hurriedly asked, Fowling, can you conceal the commotion caused by the fight between the strange beasts, as well as the fragrance of the ripened earth ginseng? No problem. Fowling in his sea of consciousness waved his hand to set up a restriction as he replied. Seeing that Fowling could conceal the commotion of the entire mountain, Yu Haoran could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The reason he took the risk to come here alone was because of the omnipotent Fowling. If even Fowling could not conceal the fragrance of the ripened earth ginseng, then he could only rely on the abundant spirit chi in the cave after the earth ginseng was taken away to break through to the martial warrior realm. Fortunately, the omnipotent Fowling did not disappoint him in the end. As the representative of strength, every time Ba Tianxiang and sky-devouring snake clashed, the entire mountain would shake. The mountain peak, which was originally nearly 1,000 meters tall, sank by nearly 10 meters as the two strange beasts fought. Yu Haoran, what was the result of the fight between the two strange beasts? Since Yu Haoran dared to come here alone to seize the earth ginseng, it meant that he knew the entire process. Two strange beasts with the bloodline of ancient divine beasts, whether it was Yu Haoran or Wu Jingjun, would bring unimaginable benefits. Chapter 91. Inside the cave in a mountain range. We perished together. Yu Haoran replied. What about the corpses? Fowling asked. They were taken by a peak 5th rank Emperor Realm exotic beast in the depths of the mountain range. Yu Haoran carefully recalled what had happened in his previous life. He finally remembered what had happened after the two exotic beasts died. Yu Haoran, with my current strength and methods, I can conceal this mountain for a day and a night without anyone noticing anything unusual. So, after taking the earth ginseng, I hope you can return to the sect as soon as possible and bring Wu Jingjun here, Fowling suggested excitedly after learning what had happened to the two exotic beasts. No problem, but what's the reason for doing so? With the speed of gale steps, a round trip would only take a little more than 3 hours, and that was after taking the earth ginseng. Yu Haoran naturally wouldn't have any objections, but he needed to know the reason for doing so. After all, the mountain where the earth ginseng was located was dozens of miles away from where the 100 Chi Gate disciples trained. He was worried that a fellow disciple would accidentally wander in. Refining Ba Tianxiang's blood essence will not only help you break through to the martial warrior realm, but also help you achieve the strongest physical body and possess the strength of dragons and elephants in the future. Helping Wu Jingjun refine sky-devouring snake's blood essence will improve his bloodthirsty physique and help him unlock the complete bloodthirsty physique faster, Fowling explained. Okay, after taking the earth ginseng, I'll bring Wu Jingjun here as soon as possible. Achieving the strongest physical body and unlocking the complete bloodthirsty physique. Fowling's explanation made Yu Haoran very excited. He couldn't wait to return to Qingyan Peak and bring Wu Jingjun here. Just as Yu Haoran and Fowling were discussing the use of the exotic beast corpses, the battle between Ba Tianxiang and Sky-Devouring Snake had reached its climax. Whether it was Ba Tianxiang or Sky-Devouring Snake, they both belonged to the top nobility of the exotic beasts. Moreover, Both of them had the bloodline of ancient divine beasts. This caused them to be unusually arrogant, and neither of them was willing to admit defeat easily. Half an hour later, the height of the mountain where the earth ginseng was located had dropped by nearly 100 meters. Other than the cave where the earth ginseng was located, the other areas had long been destroyed beyond recognition. The cave Yuhaoran had been hiding in earlier had long since collapsed. He was now barely hiding under a huge rock, peeking through the cracks in the rock to watch the two exotic beasts fighting each other. Fortunately, after nearly half an hour of fighting, whether it was the sky-pulling elephant or the sky-devouring snake, both of their physical strength and demonic energy had reached their limits. For the time being, they did not notice Yuhaoran under the giant rock not far from them. It's the last strike. Fowling, who had been paying attention to the fight between the two exotic beasts, suddenly reminded them. At the same time, a strong suction force suddenly came from the earth ginseng's cave, which had not suffered any damage. This suction force began to crazily draw in and devour the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Through the cracks in the rock, Yuhaoran glanced at the earth ginseng that was about to mature. Then, he looked at the two exotic beasts and stared intently at the two exotic beasts' final strike before they died. At the same time, Ba Tianxiang let out a roar toward the sky. He raised his front hooves high, and his trunk, which was 6 or 7 meters long, suddenly stretched forward. Then a ball of milky white energy shot out. Sky-devouring snake, which was almost 50 meters long, raised its head high and let out a roar. After that, it also shot out a ball of black energy at Ba Tianxiang. After shooting out the white energy, Ba Tianxiang stepped out with 4 huge elephant hooves and rushed towards Sky-devouring snake like a huge mountain. And Sky-devouring snake slid its smooth snake body and also rushed forward, not to be outdone. Boom! This was the sound of the collision between the black and white energies. Following the sound of the explosion, Yuhaoran realized that countless cracks had appeared on the huge rock above his head. He knew that this was caused by the aftermath of the collision between the black and white energies. Just the aftermath of the energy was able to produce such destructive power. It was enough to show that the true strength of these two 8th level and 9th level exotic beasts was probably not inferior to experts in the martial arts grandmaster realm. Boom! Just as the explosion caused by the black and white energies disappeared, another even louder and more powerful sound rang out. And this time, not only did the entire mountain fall another 100 meters, but the huge rock above Yuhaoran's head that had already cracked instantly turned into dust and fell onto Yuhaoran's body. In response, Yuhaoran did not dodge, nor did he care. Instead, he stared blankly at the two exotic beasts that were tightly stuck together. To be honest, based on his experience in his previous life, he had seen countless powerful exotic beasts tearing each other apart. The commotion and destructive power they caused far surpassed these two exotic beasts. However, he had never seen such a tragic scene caused by a physical collision. Seeing Yuhaoran in a daze, Thowling, who was afraid that something unexpected would happen, hurriedly reminded him, "Yuhaoran, these two exotic beast souls have already been destroyed. You could go pick the earth ginseng now." Yuhaoran replied. Then, using gale steps, he went straight for the cave where the earth ginseng was. Due to the earth ginseng's effect on the two exotic beasts, they did their best to protect the cave when they were tearing each other apart. As such, the earth ginseng and the cave where it grew did not suffer any damage. By the time Yuhaoran arrived at the cave, the spiritual qi that could be seen with the naked eye had become much thinner. He knew that the earth ginseng had completely matured. He carefully took out the earth ginseng and placed it into the wooden box that he had prepared beforehand. There was no need for intentional reminders. Fowling had already prepared a long time ago and directly stored the wooden box into the victor. Only now did Yuhaoran heave a sigh of relief. No matter what happened next, at least he had achieved his goal this time. "Fowling, I'll return to Qingyan Peak now and bring Wu Jingjun here," Yuhaoran said after leaving the cave where the earth ginseng lived. "No need." Fowling, who was in his sea of consciousness, looked at the depths of the mountain range with a serious expression, and stopped Yu Haoran from returning to Qinyan Peak. Thaling, what's wrong? It was Thaling who proposed to bring Wu Jingjun here to refine the sky-devouring snake's blood essence. And now, it was Thaling who stopped him from bringing Wu Jingjun. How could Yu Haoran not know that something had happened? I finally understand. It seems that this is a trap that is specifically targeted at Ba, Tianxiang, and sky-devouring snake, Thaling said coldly. A trap. A trap. Combining the information he had learned in his previous life and the current situation, Yu Haoran could not see the existence of any conspiracy. As the most gentle of the exotic beasts, Ba, Tianxiang rarely comes into conflict with other exotic beasts unless it is a matter of life and death. Even if they encounter an earth ginseng that can rebirth them, they will not risk their lives for it. And as the most sinister of the exotic beasts, sky-devouring snake has an almost crazy obsession with bloodline advancement. In order to become a sky-devouring python, or even its final form as a sky-devouring dragon, they're not afraid of the difference in grade and strength. And the blood of Ba Tianxiang contains the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant. Not only can it allow sky-devouring snake to become a level 7 exotic beast, but it can also restore its bloodline to the ancient times. So even if Ba Tianxiang does not want to fight, sky-devouring snake will never let it go. Thaling looked at the two exotic beasts that were tightly pressed together and asked in a complicated tone. Chapter 92. In the mountain range. Yu Haoran, have you heard of the dragon elephant? Yes, I have. Nodding, Yu Haoran could not help but recall a set of relief carvings he had seen in an ancient ruin in his previous life. That set of relief carvings recorded the details of the battle between the dragon elephant. The dragon, one of the 4 beasts of the Tianxian continent, was a divine beast that had broken free from the shackles of a strange beast. It was one of the races that could compete with a martial god realm expert, and was once the overlord of ancient times. However, in that set of relief carvings, the result of the battle between the dragon elephant was not the victory of the divine dragon. Instead, it was chased out of the ancient continent by the divine elephant. At the same time, in ancient times, there were people with outstanding wisdom who combined the advantages of the dragon elephant and created a set of double strike techniques that could display the speed of the dragon and the strength of the elephant at the same time. Unfortunately, that set of double strike techniques that surpassed the heaven rank had long been lost. After hearing Yu Haoran's description of the battle between the dragon elephant depicted in the relief carvings, Thaling nodded and continued speaking. Yu Haoran, you should know that a divine realm or saint realm beast like the heavenly elephant that contains the bloodline of an ancient divine beast is a herd of strange beasts. The smallest herd of elephants has at least 3 to 5, and the largest herd may have dozens of elephants. Since the heavenly elephant has the bloodline of an ancient divine elephant, an adult heavenly elephant will at least be a rank 7 king exotic beast. And a heavenly elephant that can give birth to offspring has to be at least rank 5, which is the peak of the martial emperor realm. In other words, this heavenly elephant in front of us is not yet an adult. There are at least 2 elephants behind it that may have reached or even surpassed the rank 5 elephant emperor or elephant saint. Thaling, what's the reason? At this point, Yu Haoran somewhat understood what he was talking about. However, he did not quite understand what the mastermind behind this plot could gain by killing the young heavenly elephant. The reason why the ancient divine beasts were so powerful and why they were able to become the overlords of the ancient era and rule the ancient era for tens of millions of years was mainly because their bloodline contained a trace of the original power from the beginning of the world. So, I think the mastermind behind this probably wants to obtain the trace of the ancient divine beast's origin energy in these 2 young exotic beasts. However, they don't want to offend the elephant herd behind the heavenly elephant, so they decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Thaling finally revealed the reason behind the mastermind's actions. No wonder. After hearing Thaling's explanation, Yu Haoran finally understood why the experts of the sect in his previous life had allowed the strange beast in the depths of the mountains to take away the corpses of Ba Tianxiang and Sky-Devouring Snake. Perhaps they had also seen through the clues. Tower Spirit. If that's the case, should we leave immediately? To be able to calculate that the mastermind behind this might have reached the 5th stage Elephant Emperor or even the 4th stage Elephant Saint, his cultivation was at least at the peak of the 5th stage among the Emperor exotic beasts. In the face of such a powerful, strange beast, not to mention now, even if he was at the peak of the martial Emperor level in his previous life, he would not be a match for the other party. In order to avoid getting into trouble that was difficult to deal with, Yu Haoran suggested leaving. The victor's Thowling instantly appeared in his sea of consciousness and said with an unusually disdainful expression, "You can leave, but if you want me, the great Thowling, to return empty-handed, how is that possible?" Then his slightly illusory hands formed a seal, and the seal directly merged into the corpses of the 2 strange beasts. Then 2 streams of blood, each as thick as a thumb, flew out of the corpses and rushed into the victor in Yu Haoran's sea of consciousness. "Thowling, let's leave quickly." As Thowling began to extract the blood from the 2 strange beasts' corpses, a sense of extreme danger welled up in his heart. Yu Haoran knew that Thowling's actions had angered the mastermind behind this, and hurriedly reminded him, "All right, with your and Wu Zhengjuan's strength, 1/5 of the 2 strange beasts' blood essence is enough." Fortunately, in less than a minute, the Tower Genie finally finished drawing the blood and explained, "The Tower Genie has been drawing blood for a long time. Let's go now." Seeing that Thowling had finished extracting blood, Yu Haoran mobilized all the origin force in his Dantian and left Shandong Peak like a gust of wind, heading straight for Qingyun Peak. Less than 5 seconds after Yu Haoran left the peak, a fox-like strange beast that was less than half a meter in size, but had 6 tails, appeared on the peak. Looking at the 2 strange beast corpses that had lost 1/5 of their blood, the fox-like strange beast's sharp face flushed red with anger. Raising its head to look in the direction Yu Haoran had fled, the fox-like strange beast pondered for a long time. In the end, it clenched its teeth and stretched out a tail, directly wrapping around the 2 strange beast corpses, and soared into the sky. However, when it was in midair, it unwillingly stretched out another huge tail and smashed it down on the peak that had already sunk a few hundred meters. Boom! The peak that was smashed by the fox-like strange beast's tail immediately let out a deafening explosion. Following the deafening explosion, the peak that was still 700 to 800 meters tall was instantly reduced to a pile of powder drifting down. Hearing the explosion behind him, Yu Haoran couldn't help but be startled. He knew that Thowling's act of extracting the strange beast's blood essence had angered the mastermind. Afraid that the mastermind would catch up to him, Yu Haoran didn't turn back to look. Instead, he used all his strength to execute Gale's steps, hoping to return to Qingyun Peak as soon as possible. After his rebirth, his potential and comprehension had been constantly increasing, allowing him to deepen his comprehension of Gale's steps in the face of life and death. In less than an hour, not only did his Gale steps reach the peak of the greater success realm, it even showed signs of approaching the perfection realm. However, the mountain where the ground ginseng was located wasn't very far from Qingyun Peak. Just as Yu Haoran vaguely felt that his Gale steps was about to break through, he had already successfully returned to the base of Qingyun Peak. Without the pressure of life and death, the inspiration for a breakthrough in his Gale steps vanished in an instant. Although Yu Haoran was unwilling, he could only helplessly give up. Just as Yu Haoran returned to Qingyun Peak and entered the Hidden Moon Pavilion, Thowling waved his hand towards the depths of the mountain range. The restriction that was originally concealing the movements of the mountain range instantly disappeared. The moment the prohibition disappeared, among the 38 peaks of the 100 Feet sect, apart from the Trial Peak without a martial arts grandmaster and above, and the Qingyun Peak without any desires, dozens of valiant divine consciousnesses suddenly appeared in the 36 peaks. These divine senses instantly appeared on the mountain peak that had been reduced to powder, carefully observing the reason for the change. However, among the dozens of divine senses, there was an especially powerful one that went straight for the ground ginseng's cave that had been reduced to powder. Afterwards, a wave of anger instantly enveloped the entire 100 Chi gate, spreading to the depths of the mountain range. Only when the divine senses of the 3-peak rank 5 strange beasts appeared did that powerful divine sense stop spreading. Chapter 93. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Just as I expected, someone in the sect already knew about the existence of the Earth Ginseng. I'm afraid that the sky-devouring snake at the peak of the 8th level and 9th level might have been lured over by that person on purpose to help him guard the Earth Ginseng. In the courtyard, Yu Haoran looked up at the sky and muttered to himself. Although he had lost the power of his spiritual soul and his cultivation base at the peak of the martial royal realm after his rebirth, his powerful state of mind allowed him to vaguely sense the divine consciousnesses that were observing the situation in midair. At the same time, in order to know exactly what would happen after he took away the Earth Ginseng, Thowling constantly described the actions of those divine thoughts to him. Yu Haoran, don't worry. After hearing Yu Haoran sigh, Thowling thought that he was worried that he would be exposed and hurriedly comforted him. When I set up the restriction, I specifically concealed your aura. Unless the other party is a martial venerable who has mastered the power of the top 30 laws, no one will be able to find out that it was you. Nodding, Yu Haoran withdrew his gaze and then turned to go straight to the Hidden Dragon Pavilion's practice room. The Earth Ginseng had the effect of stimulating a special body constitution. After hearing Thowling's introduction of the Earth Ginseng's effects, Yu Haoran wanted to immediately take the Earth Ginseng and see if it could stimulate the special body constitution in his body. Now, with Thowling's help, there were no hidden dangers after he took away the Earth Ginseng. Therefore, he wanted to take the Earth Ginseng and try to stimulate the special body constitution in his blood. After taking out the box containing the Earth Ginseng from the victor and opening it, Yu Haoran indicated, "Thowling, take half of the Earth Ginseng. No regrets." Thowling did not rush to take half of the Earth Ginseng and asked, "Even if you want all of the blood ginseng, I, Yu Haoran, won't even frown." Yu Haoran nodded and promised. "Be that as it may, I can't take advantage of you for nothing." Yu Haoran's straightforward attitude made Thowling very satisfied, but he was also aware of one fact. Whether Yu Haoran was strong or not was related to whether he could escape the fate of being devoured in the future. It was also related to whether he could truly break free from the restrictions of the victor and obtain the second chance to be reborn as a weapon spirit since the creation of the world. Therefore, he had to do his best to improve Yu Haoran's cultivation and strength while ensuring that he could heal himself. After careful consideration, Thowling said, "According to the classification of spiritual herbs, this 1,000-year-old Earth Ginseng has reached the first grade of the 8th level. How about this? 1 year's worth of time acceleration and a formation that gathers the power of the stars in exchange for half of the Earth Ginseng. How about it? A formation that gathers the power of the stars." Hearing that Thowling was actually willing to take out a formation that gathers the power of the stars, Yu Haoran was so excited that he almost stood up. Ever since he obtained the gradeless body refining technique, the astral dough arts, he had been diligently cultivating at night. However, because the advancement of the astral dough arts required a large amount of the power of the stars, absorbing the scattered power of the stars at night was difficult to satisfy the energy required for the advancement of the astral dough arts. Until now, the astral dough arts cultivation technique had not improved much. If he had a formation that could gather a large amount of the power of the stars, then not only would the astral dough arts cultivation technique be able to advance quickly, it would also be able to increase the martial warrior realm without any side effects. After all, the cultivation of the martial warrior realm was focused on tempering the body. Of course, Thowling nodded and confirmed from within the victor. "Thowling, since you have a formation that gathers the power of the stars, why didn't you take it out earlier? Otherwise, the astral dough arts would not have advanced so quickly, and my strength would have increased by at least a small realm. After receiving Thaling's confirmation, Yuhaoran thought of how he had sacrificed the opportunity to use time acceleration to cultivate the astral dough arts in the Yu clan every day. You have to give something in return. Since you can't take out a treasure that can move my heart, then why should I take out a formation that is useful to you? Thaling replied indifferently, recovering the coldness from when they first met. Forget it. Thinking of the agreement they had when they first met, Yuhaoran also knew that his previous complaints were unreasonable. Thus, he waved his hand, indicating that he would not pursue the matter. Soon after, he indicated for Thaling to take half of the earth ginseng. After Thaling took half of the earth ginseng, Yuhaoran looked at the remaining half of the earth ginseng in the box and couldn't help but become excited. As one of the 3 ginseng, the earth ginseng, in addition to the effects described by Thaling, using the earth ginseng as the main ingredient and then combining it with 17 types of 9th-level spiritual herbs, one could refine a type of body refining pill that could strengthen the flesh, bones, and internal organs. Although the body refining pill couldn't directly increase one's cultivation, it could further strengthen one's foundation and increase one's potential. It was one of the essential pills for peerless geniuses and monstrous geniuses. The refining of the body refining pill wasn't difficult. Only the main ingredient and the 2 supplementary ingredients were difficult to find. Moreover, with the ability of the 100 Chi Gate, it was difficult to refine this kind of pill. In other words, as an essential pill for peerless geniuses and monstrous geniuses, he could only find a way to obtain it himself. Taking out 1/5 of the earth ginseng, Yuhaoran directly consumed it, and then allowed the energy formed by the earth ginseng to merge into his blood vessels. A minute passed, and the blood in his blood vessels didn't move at all. Regarding this, Yuhaoran wasn't anxious. He knew that the energy of the earth ginseng that had merged into his blood needed a certain amount of time to be effective. 3 minutes passed, and the blood in his blood vessels still didn't move at all. Yuhaoran couldn't help but become nervous. 5 minutes later, there was finally some movement in his calm bloodline. Feeling the movement in his blood vessels, Yuhaoran couldn't help but look forward to obtaining a special constitution, even if it was a low-ranked one. Following the movement in his blood vessels, an intense burning pain instantly assaulted him. Yuhaoran, who had outstanding willpower, couldn't help but cry out in pain. Fortunately, in his previous life, in order to cultivate the art of poison, he had endured who knows how much inhumane pain. He could barely endure this burning pain. Just as Yuhaoran began to endure the burning pain in his blood vessels, the Thaling and the victor couldn't help but shake his head. He was familiar with and understood the process of activating a special constitution. So he knew that the change in Yuhaoran's blood vessels was only the process of the blood being purified and not the activation of a special constitution. In other words, Yuhaoran's constitution was the most ordinary constitution, and there was no trace of a special bloodline inheritance. Looking at Yuhaoran, who was enduring the burning pain, he didn't know if he would be incomparably disappointed when he told him the truth. The burning pain only caught Yuhaoran off guard at the beginning, but after 30 seconds, not only was he able to endure the burning pain, he even had the energy to observe the changes in his body. He discovered that when the earth ginseng energy in his blood stimulated the blood in his blood vessels, a portion of the energy was separated and directly entered his dantian. Then, combined with the elemental energy in his dantian, it began to break through the bottleneck of the martial warrior realm. Chapter 94. Clear Cloud Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. The earth ginseng was a top-notch medicine that specifically targeted the body, bones, and internal organs. Using it to break through to the martial warrior realm was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Therefore, even though it was only a small portion of the earth ginseng's energy, it was enough to easily break through the bottleneck of the martial warrior realm. Following the rise of a powerful aura, Yuhaoran's cultivation successfully entered the martial warrior realm. At the same time, the earth ginseng's energy was not completely consumed. The remaining energy continued to merge with his body and help him increase his cultivation. However, this time, Thowling did not help him conceal the commotion caused by his breakthrough. Instead, he hoped that the commotion caused by his breakthrough would be even more sensational, increasing his position and weight in Feng Qingyun's heart. When the burning pain in his blood vessels weakened and completely disappeared, Yu Haoran's cultivation had already reached the peak of the martial warrior realm. Thowling, did I awaken my special constitution? When everything returned to normal, Yu Haoran's originally expectant expression was replaced by a frown. This was because he did not know how many times he had experienced it, but he still did not know whether or not he had awakened his special constitution. Therefore, he could only ask Thowling for help. No, although telling the truth would dampen Yu Haoran's enthusiasm, the truth was the truth. It was not something that one could hope for. Therefore, Thowling decided to reveal the truth. Yu Haoran, the constitution you possess is the most ordinary constitution. There is no possibility of inheriting a special constitution. Therefore, in the future, don't even think about awakening your special constitution. AI. Hearing that he only had the most ordinary constitution, Yu Haoran was disappointed and could not help but let out a long sigh. However, when he thought about how he had never expected the special constitution to help him, he originally planned to use the memories of his previous life and the various opportunities in this life to reach the peak of martial arts. Therefore, the disappointment on his face dissipated. Afterwards, he began to examine the changes in his strength after his breakthrough. Thowling originally wanted to comfort him, but when he saw that Yu Haoran had quickly adjusted his disappointment, he could not help but nod his head in amazement. To be able to adjust his state of mind so quickly, it was enough to show that Yu Haoran's state of mind had greatly improved after experiencing the ups and downs of emotions during the sex selection competition. Peak of the martial warrior realm. After inspecting his dantian, Yu Haoran discovered that his cultivation had already reached the peak of the martial warrior realm. His disappointment, due to the fact that he had a special constitution, had completely disappeared. Actually, he was very clear in his heart that this breakthrough did not achieve the best result. He did not use the earth ginseng to its full potential. Otherwise, with his accumulation, he would have at least reached the second grade of martial warrior. He might even have reached the peak of his second grade. Although it was a pity, Yu Haoran was not too disappointed. After consolidating his cultivation base, he stood up and left the cultivation room, heading straight for the Zhongping residence. Aside from a day of his apprenticeship, when he had a brief conversation with his master, Feng Qingyun, due to his desire to break through to the martial warrior realm and his eagerness to compete for the earth ginseng that was about to ripen, he had not had a good chat with his master. Now that he had obtained the earth ginseng and his cultivation base had reached the martial warrior realm, he wanted to see his master. Listening to his master's teachings was only one reason. His true intention was to relive the kindness his master had shown him in his previous life. Haoran requests an audience with master. Yu Haoran loudly shouted as he arrived at the Zhongping residence filled with maple trees. Come in. A gentle voice sounded from within the Zhongping residence. As Yu Haoran stepped into the Zhongping residence, Thowling completely merged with Victor's body in his sea of knowledge. He also used Victor's law of time to completely conceal his aura to prevent Feng Qingyun from detecting any clues. After his rebirth, although this was not the first time he saw his master, every time he saw him, Yu Haoran couldn't help but recall the kindness his master had shown him in his previous life. The gratitude in his heart grew even stronger. Not bad. Although Yu Haoran did not use his yuan power and was unable to discern his current cultivation level, as a martial saint expert who had comprehended a special power of law, Feng Qingyun was still able to see through Yu Haoran's true cultivation level in an instant. Although he knew that with Yu Haoran's accumulation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through to the martial warrior realm. The fact that Yu Haoran could reach the peak of first-grade martial warrior in less than 2 days was enough to show how outstanding his aptitude was. In fact, what shocked Feng Qingyun even more was that he discovered that Yu Haoran's martial warrior realm was different from that of ordinary martial warriors. The difference wasn't just in his yuan, li, and physical strength, but also in his body. There was a mysterious concept within his body that Feng Qingyun couldn't figure out. However, Feng Qingyun's temperament was indifferent, and he wasn't the type to get to the bottom of things. As long as it wasn't something harmful to his disciple, he wouldn't ask. Master, before I entered the 100 Qi gate and became your disciple, I only relied on my own intuition to cultivate. I have never cultivated systematically. Now, this disciple hopes to receive Master's guidance and teachings, Yu Haoran said sincerely. His sincerity was just an act. As the former merciless swordsman, and with more than 100 years of experience in his previous life, he already had a very detailed plan for his future cultivation. However, Feng Qingyun preferred peace and quiet. If there weren't any doubts about his cultivation or important matters, he basically wouldn't see anyone, even Chu Pingyu, who had always helped him with the affairs of Qingyun Peak. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only use his guidance on cultivation to increase the time he spent with his master. As for your future cultivation, I have an idea. After hearing Yu Haoran's intentions, Feng Qingyun didn't show any surprise. He had already prepared for it. Haoran, your aptitude, talent, potential, perception, perseverance, and wisdom are the most outstanding among all my disciples. In the future, you will definitely surpass your master. Therefore, systematic cultivation isn't suitable for you. Looking at Yu Haoran's expectant face, Feng Qingyun gently praised him. Moreover, from your performance in the ranking competition, whether it's the reckless bull fist technique used to build your foundation, the light wind palm used to attack, or the wind steps used to increase your speed, you have already reached or are close to the perfection realm. Therefore, before you break through to the martial master realm, you don't need to cultivate any more martial skills. You only need to focus on polishing your physical body and strive to build the best physical body in the martial warrior realm. As he spoke, Feng Qingyun waved his sleeve, and 3 red balls of blood appeared in front of Haoran, each the size of a dragon's eye and the color of a pill. Then, Feng Qingyun pointed at the 3 blood balls and introduced, the blood ball in the east is the blood essence of the 9th rank thick earth bear. The blood ball in the middle is the blood essence of the 3rd rank black flame bear. The blood ball in the west is the blood essence of the 6th rank earth bear. At this point, Feng Qingyun suddenly asked, Yu Haoran, did Zhongyu mention to you that the sect has a secret realm that can temper the physical body? Nodding, Yu Haoran replied, during the sect selection, I heard eldest senior brother mention a secret realm that can temper the physical body. Actually, the secret realm that the sect owns is just a magical artifact. It's an emperor-level magical artifact that uses the gravity technique that's unique to the blood essence of a bear-type magical beast to temper the body. Chapter 95. Qingyun Peak, Righteous Peace Residence. After listening to his master's explanation of the origin of the secret realm, Yu Haoran couldn't help but look at Feng Qingyun in confusion. He didn't understand how Feng Qingyun knew the true structure of the secret realm and why he had to explain everything to him. The structure of the sect's secret realm was a secret of the sect. Aside from a few of the higher-ups and the senior elders, even some of the core disciples of the Martial King realm or the elders with real power at the peak of the Martial King realm didn't know the exact origin and structure of the secret realm. Facing Yu Haoran's confused gaze, Feng Qingyun didn't explain too much. He only continued to explain the reason why he had given him the blood essence of 3 different types of bear-type beasts. Haoran, I don't know if you have practiced any body refining techniques, but from your performance in the sect's ranking competition, I know that your current physical body is very strong. I'm afraid that your physical body is not inferior to a 5th-grade martial warrior's physical body. And the bear-type blood essence that the sect can provide is the lowest grade and most common type of bear-type blood essence. I'm afraid that it won't be able to achieve the best effect of tempering the physical body. Therefore, when you use the secret realm to temper your physical body, you can use these 3 types of bear-type king blood essence to replace the ordinary bear-type blood essence provided by the sect. At this point, Feng Qingyan took out a piece of paper and handed it to Yu Haoran. He continued to explain, "On this paper is the method to replace the blood essence in the secret realm." Yu Haoran couldn't be more familiar with Feng Qingyan's character. As long as he wasn't willing to explain, no matter how much you asked, it would be useless. Therefore, he didn't pursue the reason why his master had told him the structure of the secret realm. Instead, he obediently listened to the reason why he had given him the blood essence. "Thank you, master." Yu Haoran gratefully expressed his gratitude as he received the blood essence and paper. Feng Qingyan waved his hand, indicating that Yu Haoran didn't need to be so polite. "Haoran, with your perception and perseverance, I'm afraid that the tempering of your physical body won't take up too much of your time, so you still need to go through a certain amount of training." At this point, Feng Qingyan thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I have a good relationship with a beast emperor in the depths of the mountain range. After you use the secret realm to temper your body, you can go to the depths of the mountain range to experience life and death battles with beast emperors. You can further improve and perfect the flaws of your body and strive to build a perfect body as soon as possible." Yu Haoran was even more shocked when he heard that his master was actually on good terms with the Emperor Beast in the depths of the mountain range. The Emperor Mutated Beast in the depths of the mountain range was a 5th rank Emperor Mutated Beast, which was equivalent to a martial Emperor Realm expert. As for Master, he was only an expert at the peak of the martial King Realm. How could he be respected by a King Realm exotic beast? Moreover, judging from his tone just now, he seemed to have a good relationship with that King Realm exotic beast. Yu Haoran suddenly realized that although he had successfully returned to the sect of his previous life and was once again under his master's tutelage, his experiences in his previous life seemed to have completely changed. Moreover, his master wasn't just an ordinary martial King Realm expert like he thought. As if he didn't notice Yu Haoran's doubts, Feng Qingyan continued speaking. "When you return from the depths of the mountain range, your physical body should be in a near-perfect state, and your cultivation will probably reach the 7th grade of martial warrior. At that time, Master will consider how to help you break through to the martial master realm, as well as prepare the martial skills and weapons needed for the martial master realm." Many thanks for Master's nurturing. Although there were thousands of questions in his heart, Yu Haoran was very clear that since his master ignored his doubts, it meant that he didn't want to explain too much. Therefore, he could only suppress his doubts in his heart and thank his master for arranging things for him. "All right, that's all for now." After accepting Yu Haoran's thanks, Feng Qingyan indicated that he could leave for the time being. After Yu Haoran left the fair residence, Feng Qingyan's face revealed a complicated expression as he looked at Yu Haoran's back. Ever since he had comprehended the laws and broken through to the martial saint realm, he had been affected by the power of the laws. His temperament had become more at ease, and he had no desires. Therefore, when it came to teaching his disciples, he focused on guiding them and didn't interfere too much. However, when he faced Yu Haoran, he discovered that the power of the laws that allowed him to be at ease was actually boiling over. He knew that this boiling feeling was a sign that his cultivation was increasing by leaps and bounds. As his cultivation increased, he could vaguely feel the arrival of a disaster. Although he usually didn't care about his disciples, it didn't mean that he didn't love them. Therefore, he decided to change his previous attitude and try his best to help his disciples increase their cultivation. He tried his best to help them solve some difficult problems so that they could better deal with the impending disaster. After leaving the fair residence, Yu Haoran turned his head and glanced behind him. Then, he used Gale steps to return to the Hidden Moon Pavilion. However, he didn't enter the cultivation room. Instead, he directly sat on a stone chair in the pavilion in the courtyard. His mind touched the imprint in his sea of consciousness. Then, his mind turned into a body and entered the victor. After Yu Haoran's mind entered the victor, Faling said with a complicated expression, "Yu Haoran, don't think too much and don't ask too many questions. You only need to know that your master's cultivation isn't at the peak of the martial king realm. You only need to know that he has no ill intentions towards you." Afterwards, he waved his hand at Yu Haoran. Before Yu Haoran could express his opinion, he was directly kicked out of the victor and out of his sea of consciousness. Fouling. After his mind returned to his body, the unwilling Yuhauran continued to call out. However, facing Yuhauran's calls, Fouling, who was standing in the victor, didn't respond. AI. Seeing Fouling forcefully chasing him away and ignoring him, Yuhauran knew that it was useless to continue calling out. At the same time, he could roughly guess that Feng Qingyun, who he thought was very ordinary in his previous life, was hiding some unknown methods. In other words, his master, who he thought was only at the Martial King realm, was actually at the Martial King realm. He might even be at the peak of the Martial King realm. Otherwise, how could he have such a close relationship with a peak rank 5 Emperor Beast? However, if his master was an expert who surpassed the peak of the Martial King realm, then how could he have been killed by a few peak Martial King realm experts in his previous life? If he wanted to find out all of this, he needed to increase his cultivation as quickly as possible. The higher his cultivation, the stronger his strength, the more qualified he would be to find out all of this. After thinking through all of this, Yuhauran stopped calling out to Fouling and went straight to the cultivation room. He had used the secret realm, or rather, the magic tool, which the sect used to temper the body a few times in his previous life. Later on, he found records of this magic tool in some ruins. He knew the basic structure of the magic tool, as well as how to better activate the magic tool's power. The rank 9 Thick Mountain Bear, the rank 8 3rd rank Black Flame Bear, and the rank 8 6th rank Earth Bear. These 3 types of exotic beasts were not only the kings of exotic beasts, but also the nobility of the bear kings. Not only did their essence blood contain a very complete gravity technique, but the magic tool could also increase the gravity technique's effect by several times. In other words, using the method of using the magic tool that he found in the ruins, he could make the blood essence blood of the rank 9 Thick Mountain Bear display the power of the rank 8 first rank. He could also make the blood essence blood of the rank 8 3rd rank Black Flame Bear display the power of the rank 8 4th rank, or even the rank 5 rank. Although his body had been strengthened by the Reckless Bull Fist technique and the Star Do arts, and the strength of his body far surpassed that of an ordinary martial artist, he was still a little lacking if he wanted to perfectly withstand the increased power of the gravity technique. Chapter 96. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Fouling. I'm not asking for any secrets about my master. I just want the star formation in exchange for the earth ginseng. Sitting cross-legged in the practice room, Yuhauran explained his attitude to Fouling through his mind. Here you are. When Yuhauran went straight to the practice room, Fouling had already guessed his thoughts. Therefore, he had already prepared and directly transmitted the formation about gathering the power of the stars to Yuhauran. Carefully reading the formation about gathering the power of the stars that Fouling gave him, Yuhauran found that this formation was one that he had never heard of or seen in his previous life. This formation seemed to be very similar to the spirit gathering formation that gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, but some of the techniques and marks that connected with the power of heaven and earth could not be compared with the current formations. Fouling, this formation that gathers the power of the stars, is very different from the current formations. Could it be? Yes, this formation that gathers the power of the stars was indeed made by an expert in ancient times. Although Yuhauran did not say it explicitly, Fouling knew what he meant, so he directly admitted it and explained. However, after going through the 3 disasters in ancient times, the Middle Ages, and the Near Ancient times, not only did the environment and spiritual chi of the Tianxian continent change dramatically, but the position of the stars also changed. Therefore, this set of formations has been modified by several generations of experts, as well as my own understanding of formations, and has been simplified. Speaking of this, Fouling was afraid that Yuhauran would be disappointed, so he encouraged him. Of course, as long as your cultivation reaches the martial sage realm and you can perceive the power of law, then I will give you the complete star formation. Yuhauran did not care that the gathering formation given by Fouling was only a simplified version, because through the comprehension just now, he knew that even if it was a simplified version of the star-gathering formation, the amount of star power gathered was enough for him to use at his current stage. Moreover, the complete version of the star formation required a higher level of cultivation and comprehension. With his current cultivation and strength, it would be difficult for him to set up the complete version of the star formation in a short period of time. Therefore, the simplified version of the star formation was the most suitable formation for the current stage. After the conversation ended, Yu Haoran calculated the time and found that there was still some time before the stars appeared at night. Taking advantage of this time, he took out the wooden box containing the earth ginseng from the victor and cut off 1/10 of the remaining earth ginseng. He planned to use the enormous energy contained in the earth ginseng to increase his potential and break through to the second grade of martial warrior. Time passed by second. The bottleneck of the second grade of martial warrior did not pose too much of a problem to him. With the enormous energy contained in the earth ginseng, not only did he easily break through to the second grade of martial warrior, but he also directly reached the peak of the second grade of martial warrior. If he still had spirit stones, even if they were only of the third grade of the ninth grade, he could use them to reach the peak of the second grade of martial warrior in the shortest amount of time possible. However, in order to break through to the peak of the 10th grade of martial disciple realm, not only did he use up all the resources provided by the sect, but he also used up all the third grade of the ninth grade spirit stones he obtained from his family's treasury. Now, he only had one bottle of ninth grade of the 10th grade of the chi recovery pill left. Unless he continued to consume the earth ginseng and used its enormous energy to break through, it would be difficult for him to reach the peak of the second grade of martial warrior in a short period of time. Opening his eyes, Yu Haoran calculated the time and discovered that it was already evening. The stars in the sky were about to appear, so he directly got up and left the cultivation room. He stood in the courtyard and observed the stars in the sky. Today's weather was quite good. Not only were there no clouds in the sky, but the sky was also densely covered with stars. It was the best time to set up a star-gathering formation. Although the star-gathering formation given to him by Thaling was only a simplified version, there were two ways to set it up. The first method was to use various magic tools or materials to gather the power of the stars in a large area. Although, with his understanding of formations from his previous life, he could set up the first type of formation, not to mention the magic tools. He did not even have the materials to refine them. Therefore, he could only use the second method to set up the formation, which was to use the combination of Yuan Li and the imprint to gather the power of the stars in a small area. Although the cultivation of the reckless bull fist made his physical body much stronger than the average warrior, compared to the elite disciples of the top and first-rate sects, his physical strength was still far inferior. Moreover, he had only scratched the surface of the star incantation given to him by Thaling. Gathering the power of the stars in a small area was just right for his current state. Using the imprint method to gather the power of the stars was considered as forcibly gathering the scattered power of the stars in the surroundings. Therefore, every imprint required a certain amount of Yuan Li. In order to complete the imprint required to set up the formation, he needed to form a total of 13 imprints. Therefore, before he formed the imprint, he took out the energy recovery pill given to him by the sect. He planned to use the energy recovery pill to replenish his Yuan Li when he ran out of Yuan Li. After finding an open space suitable for gathering the power of the stars, Yu Haoran directly sat cross-legged on the ground. He then closed his eyes and recalled the imprints related to setting up the formation. After he had completely memorized these imprints, Yu Haoran directly mobilized the Yuan Li in his dantian and began to condense the imprint of the formation. As the first imprint slowly took shape, the Yuan Li in his dantian rapidly decreased like a flood breaking through a dam. Fortunately, by the time the first imprint was successfully formed, the Yuan Li in his dantian had been consumed less than 10%. This was also due to his successful breakthrough to the martial disciple 10th grade, which allowed the capacity of his dantian to be more than 10 times that of an ordinary martial artist. Otherwise, each imprint would consume at least 70% of his Yuan Li. With such a large consumption, he was afraid that he would need to rely on the help of an imprint to recover once. After the first imprint was successfully formed, the speed of the subsequent imprints became faster and faster, and the consumption of yuan li also became less and less. Even so, by the time the 12th imprint was condensed, the yuan li in his dantian had already consumed 90% of his yuan li. Considering that there was still one more imprint to be condensed, and after gathering the power of the stars, he still needed to use the fusion of yuan li and the power of the stars to enhance the strength of his physical body and further improve his cultivation. Therefore, he temporarily stopped condensing the imprint and chose to take the energy recovery pill that he had already prepared to recover the yuan li he had consumed. Just as Yu Haoran took the energy recovery pill to recover the yuan li he had used to condense the imprint, Thowling and the victor was already looking at him with a face full of shock. Thowling had personally modified the simplified formation, so he was very familiar with the amount of yuan li that was required to condense the imprint. Originally, he had thought that even if Yu Haoran relied on the capacity of his dantian that was more than 10 times that of an ordinary martial artist, he would at most be able to condense 5 to 6 imprints before the yuan li in his dantian would be completely depleted. Chapter 97. Clear Cloud Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Yu Haoran, who had taken the Origin Recovery Pill to recover his yuan li, couldn't help but frown. The Origin Recovery Pill given by the sect was a 10th level 9th grade pill. Not only could it satisfy the cultivation of a 9th grade martial disciple, it was also very effective for cultivators below the 3rd grade martial warrior level. According to normal calculations, a single Origin Recovery Pill could recover at least 70 to 80% of yuan li. Even if the capacity of the dantian was 10 times that of a normal martial artist, a single Origin Recovery Pill could recover at least 20% of yuan li. But what about the actual recovery rate? A single Origin Recovery Pill couldn't even recover 5% of yuan li, much less 20%. This made Yu Haoran worried. He was worried that in the future, if he used too much yuan li, the recovery process would be very difficult. Or it could be said that he needed higher-grade medicinal pills to recover the essence energy that he expended. Fortunately, with his rich cultivation experience, he temporarily threw this worry out of his mind and focused on recovering the yuan li in his dantian. Since a 10th level 9th grade Origin Recovery Pill was not effective, then what about 3, 5, or 9 pills? In order to recover the yuan li in his dantian as soon as possible, Yu Haoran directly swallowed all the Origin Recovery Pills in the pill bottle. Then, with the help of the 10 Origin Recovery Pills, he recovered 50% of his yuan li in the shortest amount of time. With the amount of yuan li stored in his dantian, 50% of his yuan li was enough to combine with the power of the stars to increase his cultivation. Therefore, Yu Haoran continued to mobilize the yuan li in his dantian and began to condense the last imprint. When the last imprint slowly took shape, a faintly discernible pulling force began to slowly gather the power of the stars in the sky. Feeling the effect of the last imprint, Yu Haoran was overjoyed. Then, using the gathering formation given by the Thowling, he imprinted the last imprint in the predetermined position. When the last imprint was imprinted in the predetermined position, the faint pulling force began to increase, and the scattered power of the stars in the sky began to gather around him. As more and more power of the stars were attracted, enveloped Yu Haoran. Yu Haoran, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, gradually turned into a dazzling star. Fortunately, in order to avoid attracting the attention of a certain person, Thowling had already set up a concealment barrier in advance. For the time being, no one had discovered the abnormality of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Yu Haoran was overjoyed when he felt the energy of the stars gathering around him become denser and denser, and he hurriedly circulated the astral battle formula to start absorbing the energy of the stars to temper his body. When the dense star energy was swallowed by the astral battle mantra and seeped into his body, Yu Haoran was pleasantly surprised to find that besides tempering the body, The star energy also had a tempering effect on the soul in his sea of consciousness. However, compared to the tempering of the physical body, the power of the stars did not have an obvious effect on the tempering of the soul. If it weren't for the fact that his mental state was very strong and he had a certain amount of experience in the study of the soul, it would have been very difficult for him to feel the improvement in his soul. Not only could it strengthen the body, but could also increase the strength of the soul. Yu Haoran attached great importance to the power of the astral battle formula and decided that in the future, as long as he had time, he would cultivate the astral battle formula with all his might. Yu Haoran, who was immersed in his cultivation, did not feel the passage of time at all. When he discovered that the star energy around him had begun to decrease, he finally returned to his senses. Although the sky was not yet bright, the stars in the sky had already begun to disappear. Taking advantage of the fact that there was still some star energy around him, he seized the remaining time to continue cultivating. When the star energy had completely disappeared, Yu Haoran did not hurry to leave. Instead, he continued to sit cross-legged on the slightly moist ground and felt the changes that a night of cultivation had on his body. Because the effect of the star energy on the tempering of the soul was very weak, he could not feel any changes in his soul after a night of cultivation. However, the effect of the star energy on the tempering of the body was very obvious. With the help of the barbaric ox fist technique and the strengthening of his body, when he broke through to the martial warrior realm, his body was at the early 5th grade martial warrior realm before he started cultivating the astral do arts. Then, after a night of absorbing and tempering the star energy, his body's grade had now reached the middle stage of a 5th grade martial warrior. Although it was only a small increase in a small realm, the effect was very shocking. Because spirit energy was easy to cultivate, tempering the body was very difficult. Not only did it require a long time, but it also required a large amount of energy. Normally, if a martial artist wanted to increase the grade of their body by a small realm, it would take at least 10 days to half a month, and at most 1 to 2 months. But what about him? He only used less than a night's time. This speed was enough to prove the power of the astral battle formula. Seeing that Yu Haoran had finished cultivating and had opened his eyes, Thaling asked, "Yu Haoran, how do you feel?" The astral battle formula is probably not inferior to a heaven tier cultivation technique. A formation that gathers the star energy is terrifying. It's comparable to a peak profound tier formation or even an early earth tier formation. Combined with his feelings after a night of cultivation, Yu Haoran gave what he believed to be the best evaluation of the astral do arts and formations. Yu Haoran, the true power of the astral battle formula will have to wait until you cultivate it to a high level before you can truly feel the power of the body refining technique. As for the formation that gathers the star energy, if it is arranged using a magic tool, the amount of star energy involved will make you feel fear. Although Yu Haoran gave a very high evaluation, Thaling was not very satisfied. Therefore, he explained the power of the astral battle formula and the formation that gathers the star energy. Yu Haoran did not refute this. Not to mention the 13 magic tools needed to arrange the formation. Even finding the materials to refine the formation was a very difficult task. Not to mention, he was not an expert in refining tools, and the 100 Chi Gate did not have a sect that refined tools. Therefore, he did not take Thaling's words to heart for the time being about the effects of using magic tools to arrange the formation. After using the star energy to cultivate for a night, Yu Haoran felt that the strength of his physical body was completely capable of withstanding the gravity technique formed by the 9th level thick mountain bear's blood essence. Therefore, he planned to go to the Hall of Merit and use the secret area to refine his physical body. More accurately, he planned to use the magic tool to refine his physical body and continue to increase the strength of his physical body. After finishing his cultivation, Yu Haoran first returned to his bedroom to change into a green robe exclusive to the inner disciples of the 100 Chi Gate. Then, he went straight to the canteen of the Qingyun Peak. Although martial artists absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth into their bodies and needed less food, they still needed to eat a certain amount before breaking through to the martial ancestor realm. Moreover, he was going to use the gravity technique to refine his physical body. Not only did it consume Yuan Li, but it also consumed a shocking amount of physical strength. Therefore, he needed to replenish his energy in advance. The 38 peaks of the 100 Qi Gate all had canteens, but the people in charge of the canteens were all service disciples with low cultivation and average qualifications. Only the Qingyun Peak was an exception. This was because when Feng Qingyun first became a disciple of the Qingyun Peak, as his servant, second senior brother Lu Guangwei entered the Qingyun Peak as a service disciple and was responsible for the chores in the canteen. Although Feng Qingyun later broke through to the martial king realm and became the peak master of the Qingyun Peak, second senior brother did not give up the management of the canteen and often stayed in the canteen. Fortunately, there were very few disciples in the Qingyun Peak. For example, the disciples of Chu Zhongyu's generation were not greedy and did not want to be served by others. Therefore, they did not recruit service disciples from the trial peak. Chapter 98. Qingyun Peak, in front of the cafeteria. When Yu Haoran arrived at the cafeteria, he saw second senior brother Lu Guangwei lying leisurely under a big tree with his eyes closed. Although second senior brother's aptitude was not very outstanding, he had been Feng Qingyun's servant since they were young. The two of them had a very close relationship, so he had received the most care. Logically speaking, with the care of Feng Qingyun, who might be a martial emperor expert, Lu Guangwei's cultivation should not have advanced so slowly. However, it was because of his lazy and unenterprising character that his cultivation progress was so slow. When he was less than 3 meters away from second senior brother, Yu Haoran called out softly, "Second senior brother." "Hey, ninth junior brother, why are you here?" Hearing someone call him, Lu Guangwei opened his eyes and looked at the person who had come. He immediately asked in surprise. Then he slapped his forehead and said self-reproachfully, "Oh right, I forgot that you and 10th junior brother are still martial disciples. You need to eat." Then, without allowing Yu Haoran to speak, he turned around and went straight to the kitchen. At the same time, he said excitedly, "Ninth junior brother, just you wait. Wait for senior brother to make you an unforgettable meal." Looking at second senior brother, who went straight to the kitchen with a face full of excitement, Yu Haoran could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. However, he did not try to persuade him. This was because he knew his second senior brother's character and conduct very well. He knew that serving his master well was his lifelong pursuit. However, due to his own aptitude and lazy character, his second senior brother knew that his achievements in martial arts would not be too high. Therefore, he could only focus on food. His biggest wish in life was to be able to make food that martial kings, martial emperors, martial sages, martial honors, and even Emperor Wu could not refuse. Yu Haoran knew that he had a way to fulfill second senior brother's wish. However, the prerequisite was that his cultivation had to break through the martial ancestor realm and be able to use the power of his soul. Only then could he take second senior brother to a secret place to accept the inheritance of a peak martial sage expert who had entered the Tao through food. He walked to the chair where second senior brother had been lying and sat down. He enjoyed a rare moment of peace through the gaps in the leaves. However, this peace did not last long before it was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Slightly raising his head, Yu Haoran saw that the person who had come was Wu Zhengjun, who had been cultivating in seclusion for the past 2 days. In fact, after obtaining 1/5 of Ba Tianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence, Yu Haoran had gone to find Wu Zhengjun, hoping that he could use sky-devouring snake's blood essence to further unlock the bloodthirsty physique. However, when he arrived at the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, where Wu Zhengjun resided, he found that Wu Zhengjun was already in closed-door cultivation. In desperation, he could only choose to temporarily use the earth ginseng to stimulate his special constitution. Ninth senior. Wu Zhengjun was stunned when he saw Yu Haoran lying on the recliner. In a while, I will use the secret realm to temper my body. I need to replenish my strength in advance. So I asked second senior brother to prepare food for me. Seeing the confusion on Wu Zhengjuan's face, Yu Haoran immediately knew what he was thinking, so he explained. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Wu Zhengjun was relieved. His tone was full of joy as he said, "Coincidentally, I will also use the secret realm to temper my body and then use the improvement of my body to further activate my special physique." "Okay, go tell second senior brother and come back. I have something to tell you." Yu Haoran agreed with Wu Zhengjuan's idea of using the improvement of his body to further activate his bloodthirsty physique. However, compared to using the secret realm to further activate his special physique, the effect of using sky-devouring snake's blood essence was far better. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to tell him that after he finished tempering in the secret realm, he could go to the Hidden Moon Pavilion to receive sky-devouring snake's blood essence. In this way, he could also refine Ba Tianxiang's blood essence in front of Wu Zhengjun and strengthen his confidence in following him. After all, if the two of them refined Ba Tianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence together, it would also prove that he truly regarded him as a brother. The Clear Cloud Peaks dining hall was very small. Other than the dining hall, there was a kitchen at the back. Therefore, Wu Zhengjun did not spend too much time and came back. "Zhengjun, what realm is your cultivation now?" Yu Haoran asked when Wu Zhengjun came back. "I just broke through to the martial warrior realm yesterday, and now I have barely stabilized my realm." Wu Zhengjun replied truthfully. "Yu Haoran, Wu Zhengjuan's current state is not the best time to use sky-devouring snake's blood essence." Just as Yu Haoran was about to nod and reveal sky-devouring snake's blood essence, the victor's Thaling reminded him in a timely manner. "Why?" Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. When they were fighting for the Ginseng's mountain peak, if it weren't for the unexpected appearance of the mastermind, the Thaling had planned to let him and Wu Zhengjun directly refine Ba Tianxiang and sky-devouring snake's blood essence. Why did it say that now was not the best time to use it? Yu Haoran, whether it's Ba Tianxiang or sky-devouring snake, they are not only 8th level and 9th level exotic beasts, but also contain the bloodline of ancient divine beasts. The energy contained in their blood essence is very shocking. In the process of refining and consuming, the energy that explodes will have a great impact on the body. If the physical strength of the body is not strong enough, it is very likely that the body will not be able to withstand the impact of the blood essence and eventually explode and die. "Thaling, aren't you harming me and Wu Zhengjun?" Hearing the consequences of the body not being able to withstand the impact of the blood essence explosion, Yu Haoran felt a wave of lingering fear and couldn't help but complain to the Thaling. In the face of Yu Haoran's complaints, the Thaling was not angry and patiently explained, "The situation is different. When the two exotic beasts perished together, the energy in the blood essence was already at its lowest, and under the effect of mutual promotion and suppression, the ancient divine blood in the bloodline of the two exotic beasts was completely dormant. At that time, even if the physical body could not withstand the impact of the blood essence explosion, at most some energy would be wasted, and it would not cause any harm to the physical body. But after a period of rest, the ancient divine blood in the blood essence will revive and counteract the forced refining of the blood essence. So Wu Zhengjuan's current state is not suitable for consuming the blood essence. So that's how it is." After hearing the Thaling's explanation, Yu Haoran suddenly understood and couldn't help but feel apologetic for his previous complaints, so he sincerely apologized to the Thaling. "I'm sorry, I was too impatient." "It's fine," Thaling continued, indicating that he didn't care. "After the astral battle arts, with your current physical strength, you can consume the blood essence of the heavenly elephant, but Wu Zhengjun is still far from it. His physical body must be at least a 6th grade martial warrior before he can consume the blood essence of the sky-devouring snake." "Thaling, what level is Wu Zhengjuan's physical body at now?" "Only a 6th grade martial warrior could consume the blood essence of the sky-devouring snake, so Yu Haoran wanted to know the specific level of Wu Zhengjuan's current level." Although the bloodthirsty body is a special body constitution, he has only unlocked 1/10 of it, and his physical body is barely at the peak of a second-grade martial warrior. Chapter 99. Clear Cloud Peak in front of the dining hall. He was at the peak of second-grade martial warrior, 4 small realms away from the 6th-grade martial warrior. Considering that raising the grade of the fleshly body was far more difficult than raising the level of cultivation, Yu Haoran began to think about how to quickly raise the grade of Wu Zhengjuan's fleshly body. Thaling's source energy was not only suitable for increasing the grade of the body, but also for awakening special constitutions. However, the source energy was the foundation of magic tools. Consuming too much of the source energy would harm the Thaling. Thus, as soon as this idea appeared, he immediately discarded it. The earth ginseng's effect was similar to the Thaling's source energy. It was very suitable for Wu Zhengjuan's current state. However, considering that his sister Yusiki also had a special constitution, she also needed to use the earth ginseng to further awaken and strengthen her special constitution. Considering their close relationship, he had to consider his sister's future first. Thus, he could not give the earth ginseng to Wu Zhengjun. The astral dough arts was also suitable for Wu Zhengjun. Moreover, according to the conditions he had exchanged with the Thaling, the astral dough arts was already his personal property. He had the right to decide how to deal with it. However, if he wanted to use the astral dough arts to strengthen his body, he had to be able to use a formation that gathered the power of the stars. He was able to easily use a formation that gathered the power of the stars because he was proficient in formations in his previous life. He was able to understand, master, and set up a formation in the shortest amount of time. But what about Wu Zhengjun? Based on the comprehension he displayed during the entrance exam, it would take him 3 to 5 years to master a formation that gathered the power of the stars. Thus, it would be better to use other methods to strengthen his body than to absorb the power of the stars scattered between heaven and earth. After thinking about it, Yu Haoran discovered that none of the treasures and methods he possessed could help Wu Zhengjun. This made him very disappointed. Ninth senior brother, what's wrong? After learning that he had broken through to the 1st-grade martial warrior, Yu Haoran fell into a long period of contemplation. This made Wu Zhengjun very surprised. Could it be that Yu Haoran still hadn't broken through to the martial warrior realm? On second thought, this was simply impossible. Based on Yu Haoran's performance in the sex selection competition, the martial warrior realm could not possibly be an obstacle to him. Therefore, he couldn't help but ask. I'm fine, Yu Haoran said with a smile as he waved his hand at Wu Zhengjun. Then he suddenly thought of the word bloodthirsty in Wu Zhengjuan's bloodthirsty constitution. He suddenly remembered that in his previous life, he had killed a demonic cultivator in the martial royal realm and obtained a set of secret methods from him. It was a secret method that could not only rapidly increase one's cultivation and strength, but also strengthen one's body. Of course, the side effects of that secret technique were extremely severe, and he was worried that it would negatively affect Wu Zhengjun. However, whether or not he could eliminate or weaken the side effects of the secret technique, he still had a trump card. That was the omniscient and omnipotent Thaling. Thaling, I have a set of secret techniques here that can be used to increase one's cultivation and strength, as well as strengthen one's body by devouring and refining the blood essence of living creatures. Unlike Thaling, he couldn't directly use his spiritual energy to condense the secret technique and imprint it into his knowledge sea. Therefore, Yu Haoran could only use his consciousness to read the secret technique word by word to Thaling. So, it's the modified version of the devouring the heavens and earth technique. After hearing Yu Haoran's description of the secret technique, Thaling said with a smile, Yu Haoran, don't worry. I will modify and simplify this secret technique. I guarantee that there won't be any side effects, and this secret technique will also be suitable for you to cultivate. After receiving Thaling's assurance, Yu Haoran secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he said to Wu Zhengjun, Zhengjun, after using the secret realm to temper my body, I will go to the depths of the mountains to train. At that time, You will come with me. I will teach you a secret technique so that you can use this secret technique to further strengthen your body, as well as quickly increase your cultivation and strength. Thank you, ninth senior brother. Although Wu Jingjun was very touched by Yu Haoran's care, under the influence of the bloodthirsty constitution, he was becoming less and less good at expressing his feelings. Being able to say thank you was already the best way to express his inner feelings. You're welcome. Yu Haoran waved his hand and said casually. Just as the two of them finished talking, second senior brother's voice came from the kitchen next to the cafeteria. Ninth junior brother, 10th junior brother, it's time to eat. Let's go, Yu Haoran said as he stood up from the recliner and took the lead to walk to the cafeteria. After he and Wu Jingjun sat down, Lu Guangwei walked in with a wooden basin the size of a water basin in each hand. He then placed the two wooden basins on the dining table. Ninth junior brother, 10th junior brother, your luck is not bad. Last night, I went to the depths of the mountains to look for a spiritual herb and accidentally found a 10th level 9th grade green spotted snake and a 9th level 1st grade blue spotted tiger. These two exotic beasts can be said to be the most suitable ingredients for making delicious food. Not only do they have sufficient yuan, li, and stamina, but their taste is also quite outstanding. Have a taste, Lu Guangwei introduced as he took out 2 pairs of 40-centimeter long chopsticks. Yu Haoran had tasted second senior brothers, cooking more than once in his previous life. Of course, he knew how tempting the food was. Otherwise, if he wanted to have sufficient stamina, he could just eat whatever he wanted and not waste time looking for second senior brother in the cafeteria. There was no need to choose, because all the bones of the meat had been removed, and every piece of meat was very uniform in size. When they put the meat into their mouths, a strong meaty aroma rushed to their taste buds, making them feel refreshed, as if all the pores on their body were opened. More importantly, the meat was made from 10th level and 9th level exotic beasts. The meat contained energy nourished by spiritual energy. While satisfying their taste buds, it also strengthened their physical body. The yuan li in their dantian was also slowly increasing. I'm afraid this is the most delicious stew I've ever eaten in my life. Wu Jingjun, who had also swallowed a piece of meat, was so stimulated by the delicious taste that even his bloodthirsty physique couldn't control his emotions. He couldn't help but praise. Seeing Yu Haoran and Wu Zhengjuan's faces full of enjoyment, Lu Guangwei, who was also satisfied, said with a smile, "All right, as long as you guys are willing to eat it, I'll make it for you often in the future." After enjoying the first piece of stew, Yu Haoran promised his second senior brother, if there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely capture some precious exotic beasts and let you make delicacies that will tempt even martial kings, martial emperors, and even martial sages. Senior brother, I'll be waiting. Yu Haoran's suggestion was exactly what Lu Guangwei had been pursuing, so he was touched as if he had met a soulmate. After that, he gestured to Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun to hurry up and eat, so that they could go to the secret realm to temper their bodies later. Warriors, especially those in the martial warrior realm. This was because tempering the body would consume a lot of yuan, li, and physical strength, so a lot of energy would need to be replenished. The stew that Lu Guangwei made not only contained abundant energy, but was also very delicious. In just a few minutes, the 2 big basins of stew were finished by Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun. Second senior brother, we'll take our leave first, Yu Haoran said as he stood up and bade farewell after finishing the last drop of stew in the wooden basin. If the people from the Hall of Achievements dare to cause trouble for you, they can come directly to me. Just as Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun stood up to leave the dining hall, the second senior brother, who was tidying up the wooden basins, suddenly spoke. Without needing to ask, Yu Haoran already knew what his second senior brother meant. However, things were different now. He was confident that he could face any trouble from the Hall of Achievements. Chapter 100. Qingyan Peak was located on the eastern side of the 100 Qi Gate's 38 peaks. It was 7 peaks away from the Hall of Merit, which was about 30 miles away. Therefore, after leaving the cafeteria, Yu Haoran asked for Wu Zhengjuan's permission and directly used Gale's steps to bring him to the Hall of Merit. The 7 peaks seemed very far away, but with the support of Gale's steps, it took less than 2 hours for Yu Haoran to bring Wu Zhengjun to the Hall of Merit. Unlike the other peaks where the buildings were either at the peak or halfway up the mountain, the Hall of Merit was built at the foot of the mountain. Looking at the dense crowd in front of him, Yu Haoran couldn't help but frown. In the 100 Qi Gate, the Hall of Merit had the most authority. For example, it was responsible for distributing the benefits of the disciples, arranging the missions that the disciples needed to carry out, issuing the missions and rewards for the elders and the upper echelons of the sect, being responsible for the exchange of resources, and so on. It could be said that the Hall of Merit was the most lively and bustling place in the entire 100 Qi Gate. But even if the Hall of Merit was lively, it was impossible to gather so many people like today. Moreover, these people weren't moving around inside the Hall of Merit. Instead, they were all crowded outside the Hall of Merit. It was obvious that they were watching something. Because the scene was very noisy, Yu Haoran couldn't tell what was going on. Although he did not want to get involved in these miscellaneous matters, these people were blocking the path to the Hall of Merit. Helpless, he could only let Wu Zhengjun stand behind him, and then use his powerful physical body to forcibly squeeze forward. At first, the people who were pushed aside weren't happy, but because of their strength and status, they could only choose to endure when they saw the green robes unique to inner sect disciples. However, when Yu Haoran squeezed into the inner circle, and the people he pushed aside were all wearing the same robes and had stronger auras, these people were immediately unhappy. Not only did they turn their heads and stare fiercely at Yu Haoran, but they also used their powerful strength to block in front of Yu Haoran again. Get out of the way, I want to enter the achievement hall. To be able to rely on their strength to block him. Apart from inner court disciples who had reached the martial master realm, outer court disciples who had reached the martial warrior realm did not have the ability to do so. Even so, Yu Haoran was not afraid in the slightest. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant. Why don't you tell me where you came from and let me broaden my horizons? Yu Haoran's cultivation base was completely unfathomable, as he had only used his physical body and not a single trace of elemental energy. However, judging from Yu Haoran's youthful face, he was at most 16 or 17 years old. It was impossible for him to break through to the martial master realm at such an age. Therefore, the other party suspected that Yu Haoran might have relatives in the sect. Furthermore, they were also inner sect disciples in the martial master realm. He was just borrowing their clothes. My name is Yu Haoran. I don't have any backing in the sect. How could Yu Haoran not know what the other party was up to? However, he was not afraid that the other party would find out about his background. Yu Haoran. After hearing Yu Haoran's introduction, the other party could not help but ponder. However, he did not have the slightest impression of him. I'm the champion of this year's new disciple aptitude test and ranking competition. Knowing that the other party would not be able to recall who he was, he took the initiative to remind him. So you are the peerless genius with the highest talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance among this year's new disciples. After hearing Yu Haoran's reminder, the other party instinctively took a step back and pointed at Yu Haoran as he exclaimed in surprise. Among the previous disciples of the 100 Qi Gate, most of the disciples with the highest talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance were only at the middle or peak of the martial emperor realm. If a disciple with the potential to become a beginner martial sage, it would cause a sensation in the entire sect. However, this time, the number of new disciples with the potential to become beginner martial sages had reached 5. Yu Haoran, who had won the double championship, was a peerless genius whose talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance were all at the peak of the martial sage realm. Of course, this would cause a huge sensation in the 38 peaks of the 100 Qi Gate. Although he knew that with his martial master realm, it would be easy for him to defeat Yu Haoran, he knew even more clearly that he could not make a move. If he made a move, not only would the martial ancestor realm senior brothers behind Yu Haoran find trouble with him, even the law enforcement peak would not let him off. After all, he was only an ordinary inner sect disciple. The highest achievement he had ever achieved in his life was only a martial ancestor. What about you, Howard? He was a peerless genius who could become a martial king, a martial emperor, or even a martial sage. The sect would definitely side with you, Howard. You can go in. Relying on his strength, he forcefully pushed back a person and opened up a path forward. The inner court disciple admitted defeat as he spoke. He only wanted to use the magic weapon to temper his physical body before going into the depths of the mountain range to train. Furthermore, the other party did not offend him too much. Thus, Yu Haoran did not push his luck. He nodded at the other party and led Wu Zhongjun past him. The conflict just now had attracted the attention of a portion of the surrounding people. After learning of Yu Haoran's identity, these inner sect disciples dressed in green robes who had reached the martial master realm all chose to avoid him. They allowed Yu Haoran and Wu Zhongjun to squeeze into the innermost part of the crowd. When Yu Haoran stood in the innermost part of the crowd, he finally understood the reason for the crowd's gathering. It turned out that at the main entrance of the Hall of Merit, a youth dressed in tattered green robes was standing at the entrance with a sharp sword in hand. Furthermore, from the dense, killing intent that constantly emanated from his body, it was obvious that he was looking for trouble with the Hall of Merit. So it's him. After seeing the youth's appearance clearly, Yu Haoran's face flashed with a hint of surprise. The youth standing at the entrance of the Hall of Merit was called the Sword Without Trace. He was 18 years old this year and was a loose cultivator who had entered the 100 Chi Gate through the sect selection competition 3 years ago. To be able to enter the challenge competition as a loose cultivator and eventually enter the 100 Chi Gate, a second-rate sect, was enough to show that the Sword Without Trace had his own fortuitous encounters. Thus, after understanding his situation, some people in the upper echelon of the sect had nominally accepted him as a disciple. In reality, they were trying to deprive him of his fortuitous encounters. However, the Sword Without Trace was a shrewd person. Although he was still young at the time, his mind was very meticulous. Thus, he rejected all the attempts of the upper echelon of the sect to rope him in. Then, as a servant disciple, he cultivated step by step from the trial peak. In less than 2 years, his cultivation had directly broken through the martial master realm, and he had been promoted to an inner disciple. However, according to the rules of the 100 Chi Gate, disciples who had been promoted to an inner disciple had to choose a peak as the target of their loyalty in the future. This also meant that even if he wanted to hide his fortuitous encounters, it would be impossible. However, the Sword Without Trace's method was both within and outside of everyone's expectations. The Sword Without Trace had chosen the weakest of the 36 peaks, second only to Clear Cloud Peak in terms of numbers. Its status and strength were ranked last, and it was not allocated any cultivation resources at all. Beastmaster Peak. Beastmaster Peak belonged to the 100 Chi Gates faction in name only. This was because the mountain range where the 100 Chi Gate was located was under the rule of strange beasts. It was only because of an agreement between the upper echelons that the 100 Chi Gate was given the opportunity to establish a sect. However, if they enslaved strange beasts in the area ruled by strange beasts, wouldn't that be provoking the strange beast emperor in the depths of the mountain range? Chapter 101. 100 Chi Gate, in front of the Hall of Merit. However, to everyone's surprise, even at Beastmaster Peak, the Sword Without Trace did not stay for too long. Normally, he would either go out to train or exchange for cultivation resources at the Hall of Merit. It was under this cautious and risky method of survival that the Sword Without Trace not only managed to protect his own fortune, but also made successive breakthroughs in a short span of a year. He was now at the peak of 6th grade Martial Master. Unlike how the people of the sect viewed the Sword Without Trace, Yu Haoran knew that the Sword Without Trace not only cultivated quickly, his potential was high, his swordsmanship was exquisite, and he was also a person who valued relationships and loyalty. In his previous life, when the 100 Chi Gate was in danger of being exterminated The elites and core disciples who enjoyed the protection of the sect immediately chose to flee the sect. However, the sword without trace did not leave. With the cultivation of a peak 7th grade martial king, he single-handedly fought against 9 experts of the high-level martial king realm. Not only did he protect some of the inner sect disciples of the martial master realm and successfully evacuate from the 100 feet gate, he also easily killed 9 experts of the martial king realm. Afterwards, he was attacked by an early-stage martial king expert. Not only did he heavily injure the expert, he also calmly left. Unfortunately, ever since the 100 Chi Gate was exterminated, Yu Haoran had not seen or heard any news about the sword without trace. The sword without trace, with your mere 6th grade martial master cultivation, how could you have killed a 7th grade exotic beast? Moreover, it was the king of 7th grade exotic beasts, the green-eyed wolf king. Furthermore, yesterday, Martial Uncle Lai Ching went deep into the mountain range and heavily injured a 7th grade, 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king. However, he was warned by the Emperor of Exotic Beasts in the depths of the mountain range and had no choice but to retreat. Therefore, I suspect that this green-eyed wolf king's corpse was actually killed by Martial Uncle Lai Ching. You just took advantage of it. According to the rules of the sect and the Hall of Merit, we can only give you 37th grade, 9th grade spirit stones in exchange. Just as Yu Haoran was recalling the various experiences of the sword without trace in his previous life, a contemptuous reprimand came from the Achievement Hall. The disdainful rebuke from the Achievement Hall immediately caused the surrounding people to discuss. That's right, a 7-step 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king is comparable to a peak 6th grade martial king. With the sword without trace's 6th grade martial master cultivation, not to mention injuring the green-eyed wolf king, I'm afraid he doesn't even have the courage to face it. It seems that the Achievement Palace Senior Brother did not wrongly accuse the sword without trace. I didn't expect that the sword without trace, who seemed to be honest and upright, was actually an opportunistic and treacherous man. Although everyone had deliberately lowered their voices, with the sword without trace of strength, how could he not hear them? Although he maintained a calm expression in the face of everyone's criticism, flames continuously flashed in his eyes. His left hand, tightly gripping the hilt of his sword, showed that he did not care about the crowd's discussion. However, his solitary nature made him not good with words. Faced with the Achievement Hall's slander, he really did not know how to refute. Wu Jingjun was also very familiar with the scene that was unfolding in front of the Achievement Hall. In the Wu clan, he had suffered many such slander. Furthermore, he should not be deluded to think that there would be someone who would speak up for him. This was because it was already very rare for the crowd to not take advantage of the situation to add insult to injury. Did he expect them to help him out? However, just as he thought that the sword without trace would be like him and turn around to leave, Yu Haoran suddenly walked toward the Achievement Hall. He could not help but ask, "Yu Shixiang, what do you want?" "Nothing. I just want to say a few words," Yu Haoran said calmly. Others might not believe that the sword without trace was able to kill the 7th level 3rd grade green-eyed wolf king, but Yu Haoran believed it. Furthermore, Yu Haoran also believed that when his cultivation reached the peak of 6th grade martial master, he would be able to kill a 7th level 3rd grade beast king even more easily than the sword without trace. Yu Haoran's sudden appearance might seem foolish to others, but Wu Jingjun was very touched. Since Yu Haoran was willing to stand up for a stranger who had been wronged, he would definitely not mistreat Wu Jingjun, who had chosen to follow him from the start. Thinking of this, Wu Jingjun quickened his steps to catch up to Zhang Che. Yu Haoran's sudden appearance immediately attracted the attention of the crowd, especially the disciples standing at the entrance of the Achievement Hall. They looked at Yu Haoran with doubtful expressions. The spectating disciples might not recognize Yu Haoran, but the Achievement Hall disciples in charge of distributing the benefits to the disciples recognized Yu Haoran. After the inner disciple ranking competition ended, Vice Sect Leader Lai Yin had sent 3 pictures to the Achievement Hall. One was the double champion Yu Haoran, the second was the peerless beauty Lin Mengyao, and the third was the black-clothed youth. Moreover, he had specifically warned them not to offend these 3 people. Ignoring the attention of the crowd, Yuhaoran walked to the entrance of the achievement hall and did not speak up for the sword without trace. Instead, he lowered his head to observe the corpse of the green-eyed Wolf King. After observing the corpse of the green-eyed Wolf King, Yuhaoran further confirmed that the green-eyed Wolf King had indeed died at the hands of the sword without trace. However, the reason why the sword without trace was able to kill the green-eyed Wolf King was not only because he had the ability to challenge those of a higher rank, but also because the green-eyed Wolf King was a female wolf. Moreover, it had just given birth to a pup, so its rank had temporarily dropped to the 9th rank of the 8th step. Otherwise, with the sword without trace's strength, it would have been very difficult for him to kill the green-eyed Wolf King, which had reached the 3rd rank of the 7th step, despite the gap of 6 small ranks. After observing the corpse of the green-eyed Wolf King, Yuhaoran raised his head to look at the achievement hall disciple who had just slandered the sword without trace. Then, he turned his head to look at the sword without trace. Finally, he pointed at the sword without trace and said, "This green-eyed Wolf King should have been personally killed by this senior." What? The sword without trace can kill a green-eyed Wolf King of the 7th step, 3rd rank. I'm going to vomit blood. Who is this brat? How can he say that the green-eyed Wolf King was killed by the sword without trace? That's right. I can also say that I was the one who killed the green-eyed Wolf King. That's right. Who does he think he is? He's the gate master of the 100 Chi Gate. After Yuhaoran confirmed that the green-eyed Wolf King was indeed killed by the sword without trace, the achievement hall disciple did not say anything. Instead, the crowd began to discuss among themselves. Moreover, there were many people who did not like the sword without trace and Yuhaoran who were in the limelight. They could not help but mock and humiliate Yuhaoran. Coldly looking at those who mocked and humiliated him, Yuhaoran roared, "All of you, shut up." Then he turned to the sword without trace and asked, "Senior, in your current state, I wonder if you can still use your most powerful sword technique? Not only have I used up a lot of my elemental energy, but my internal organs have also been severely injured. I can barely use the sword technique, but I don't have the power of a sword technique." Asking someone to use their most powerful sword technique was actually a taboo. However, the sword without trace did not know why, but he seemed to trust the young man who asked him to use his most powerful sword technique. Therefore, he answered honestly. Chapter 102. 100 Chi Gate, in front of the Hall of Merit. They were only going to use the sword without trace's sword moves to examine the wounds on the green-eyed Wolf King's body. It didn't matter if the moves were powerful or not. After getting Yuhaoran's permission, the sword without trace endured the pain in his organs and reluctantly performed the set of sword moves that he had been practicing for a long time. "Yuhaoran, I didn't expect the sword without trace to be so lucky. He actually obtained the monster-slaying sword art that was created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor. When the sword without trace performed the sword moves, the Thaling and the victor couldn't help but praise him and point out the specific origin of the sword moves. The Amethyst Sword Emperor. Hearing Thaling mention the Amethyst Sword Emperor, Yuhaoran vaguely remembered that he had heard this name before. Apart from the emperors of the 3 great empires, the only person who could be called an emperor was Emperor Wu. When the sword moves that the sword without trace performed formed a sword seal of the amethyst flower, a memory suddenly came to his mind. It was when he had risked his life to enter the demon god's ancient tomb. In one of the tombs outside the tomb, he had seen a peerless woman that he had never seen before. The peerless woman with a long sword seemed to be called the Amethyst Sword Emperor. At that time, there was a relief carved on the wall of the tomb. The relief was the monster-slaying sword art. However, the monster-slaying sword art that was created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor was only suitable for women. Therefore, he had only taken a few glances at it before withdrawing. This was also the main reason why he couldn't remember it at first. Thaling, as far as I know, the Amethyst Sword Emperor's sword moves are only suitable for women. How could the sword without trace, a man, be able to practice this set of sword moves? Moreover, he has already mastered the essence of the sword moves, Yuhaoran asked in confusion. There are 2 reasons. The first reason is that this guy's sword moves were created by the Amethyst Sword Emperor when he was at the peak of the Martial King realm. It only has 20% of the power of the complete monster slaying sword art. The second reason is that there is something wrong with this guy. As for what the problem is, you can guess it yourself. When Thowling explained the first reason, Yu Haoran's voice, his tone was quite serious. But when he mentioned the second reason, there was a hint of ridicule in his voice, which made Yu Haoran extremely puzzled. Although Yu Haoran wanted to see how Jian Wuhan had grasped the essence of the sword art, due to the limitations of his Yuan Qi and injuries, he only executed it halfway before stopping. This made it impossible for Yu Haoran to know the reason why he had grasped the essence of the sword art. Nodding at Jian Wuhan, Yu Haoran turned to the Hall of Merit disciples and asked, "Did you see it clearly?" Shaking his head, the Hall of Merit disciple replied politely, "I don't understand." Yu Haoran was speechless at the Hall of Merit disciple's reply. He could only point at the corpse of the Green-Eyed Wolf King. Is the sword moves at the sword without trace used the same as the sword wounds on the Green-Eyed Wolf King's fatal wounds? They're indeed very similar. After careful observation, the Hall of Merit disciple nodded in agreement. It's not just similar, it's exactly the same. This also proves that this Green-Eyed Wolf King was indeed killed by Senior the Sword Without Trace. Yu Haoran pointed out with a look of disappointment. Yu Haoran, although the sword wounds on the Green-Eyed Wolf King are similar to the Sword Without Trace's sword moves, this does not prove that the Green-Eyed Wolf King was killed by the Sword Without Trace. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the Hall of Merit disciple stubbornly refuted. Furthermore, the Sword Without Trace is only a 6th grade martial master. How could he have killed the Green-Eyed Wolf King that was comparable to a 6th grade martial king? At this moment, Yu Haoran had already understood. It wasn't that the Hall of Merit disciple didn't believe that the Green-Eyed Wolf King was killed by the Sword Without Trace. He probably wanted to take the Green-Eyed Wolf King for himself. Or perhaps he wanted to take all the resources that the Green-Eyed Wolf King could exchange for. Although he wasn't afraid of the Hall of Merit, his cultivation was still too low. For the time being, he couldn't afford to have too much conflict with the Hall of Merit. Furthermore, in the near future, he still needed to exchange for some medicine and resources from the Hall of Merit. He didn't want to offend these people from the Hall of Merit, so he could only take out more solid evidence. Therefore, Yu Haoran directly squatted down and lifted up the Green-Eyed Wolf King's hind leg. He pointed at the Wolf King's private area and said, "See for yourself." At that time, when the Sword Without Trace had killed the Green-Eyed Wolf King, he had directly injured the Green-Eyed Wolf King's buttocks a few times. This caused the Hall of Merit disciples to not look at this area when they examined the Green-Eyed Wolf King's corpse. Therefore, they didn't know the true secret of how the Green-Eyed Wolf King was killed. However, what Yu Haoran didn't notice was that when he lifted up the Green-Eyed Wolf King's hind leg, the Sword Without Trace, who had been staring at him, actually lowered his head in embarrassment. After careful observation, the Hall of Merit disciple's face first revealed a shocked expression. Then, his shock turned into excitement. After that, he directly stood up and went straight into the Hall of Merit. "Senior Brother Sword, don't worry. The Hall of Merit will give you the resources you deserve." Seeing the Hall of Merit disciple hastily leave, Yu Haoran knew what he was going to do. He also knew that the Hall of Merit disciple wouldn't make things difficult for the Sword Without Trace in order to shut his mouth. Since you're called Yu Haoran, you must be the double champion of the new disciples this time. You must be a peerless genius who has the potential to become a martial saint. The Sword Without Trace said with a gentle expression as he picked up a few strands of hair that had fallen in front of his forehead. "That's right. I am Yu Haoran, a new disciple who has just entered the Hall of Merit. However, I'm afraid only the heavens know if I can become a martial saint." While replying to the Sword Without Trace's question, Yu Haoran had a strange feeling in his heart. At first, Yu Haoran couldn't clearly see the Sword Without Trace's appearance because of the strands of hair that had fallen in front of his forehead. Now that the Sword Without Trace had taken off his hair, Yu Haoran discovered that his appearance was too gentle. There wasn't a trace of masculinity that a man should have. If it wasn't for the Adam's apple that was faintly protruding from his neck, Yu Haoran would have even suspected that he was a woman. Junior brother Yu, thank you for helping me out. The sword without trace expressed his gratitude as he formed a sword flower with one hand. As the vicious sword emperor in his previous life, how could Yu Haoran not know that using a sword flower to express gratitude was the highest form of etiquette for a swordsman? Therefore, he formed a sword flower with his fingers and returned the gesture. Senior brother sword, you're welcome. Just as Yu Haoran and the sword without trace were returning the gesture, the disciple who had just rushed into the Hall of Merit returned to the entrance with a smile on his face. Yu Haoran, many thanks. After first expressing his gratitude to Yu Haoran, the Hall of Merit disciple casually tossed a package to the sword without trace. Inside this package are 109th grade 9th level spirit stones, 10 8th grade 1st level spirit nurturing pills, 3 8th grade 1st level spirit gathering pills, and 3 500 years old purple shadow grass. It's enough to exchange for the corpse of the green-eyed Wolf King. Although the Hall of Merit disciple's introduction was very detailed, the sword without trace, who had been fooled countless times, didn't believe him at all. In front of the Hall of Merit disciple, he directly opened the package and carefully counted the items inside. The sword without trace's actions caused the originally smiling Hall of Merit disciple's expression to immediately turn gloomy. Even Yu Haoran, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but shake his head. Chapter 103. 100 Chi Gate, in front of the Achievement Hall. In order to ease the tense atmosphere, Yu Haoran took the initiative to stand in front of the Achievement Hall disciple, blocking the sword without trace who was counting the resources. Then he smiled and said, Senior brother, Junior brother Wu, and I have come this time in hopes of using the sect's secret realm to further temper our bodies. Oh, Junior brother Yu and Junior brother Wu have broken through to the martial warrior realm. Hearing that Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun wanted to use the secret realm to further temper their bodies, the Achievement Hall disciples' first reaction was that Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun had actually broken through to the martial warrior realm in such a short amount of time. However, after thinking about it, with Yu Haoran's talent and potential, and with Wu Zhengjuan's special body constitution, it was normal for them to break through to the martial warrior realm so quickly. Therefore, after regaining his composure, he directly called for an outer disciple and ordered him to bring Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun to the secret realm. Senior brother Jian, we'll meet again someday. Turning around to greet the sword without trace, Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun were led by the Achievement Hall's outer disciple to the east side of the Achievement Hall. Seeing Yu Haoran turn around and leave, the sword without trace's cold face revealed a trace of complex gentleness. However, when his gaze fell upon the Achievement Hall's outer disciple, the gentleness instantly turned into coldness. Then, he turned around and left the Achievement Hall. The secret realm that could be used to temper the body was located in a cave on the east side of the Achievement Hall. Under the guidance of the Achievement Hall's outer disciple, Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun quickly arrived in front of the cave. At this moment, there were more than 10 disciples standing in front of the cave, preparing to use the secret realm. 2 of them were familiar faces to both Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun. One of them was Meng Fanwei, who was once forced by him to challenge a 9th grade martial disciple. The other person was the black-clothed youth who was unwilling to admit defeat. He had an unusually arrogant expression and would bring disaster to the 100 Chi Gate in the future. Should I call you Junior Martial Brother Yu, or Yu Shi Xiao? Although Yu Haoran had forced Meng Fanwei to place 23rd in the ranking competition, Meng Fanwei did not resent Yu Haoran at all. Not to mention, the talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance Yu Haoran had displayed, as well as the strength to challenge those of a higher realm, made him realize that Yu Haoran had a boundless future. Befriending him would only be beneficial to him. Therefore, when he saw Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun, he greeted them enthusiastically. High 2nd grade, martial warrior. After announcing his cultivation, Yu Haoran looked at Meng Fanwei. Meng Fanwei greets Yu Shixiao. Meng Fanwei greeted with a bitter smile. Although he knew that Yu Haoran's talent was outstanding and that the martial warrior realm wouldn't take up too much of his time, he didn't expect that in just 3 days, Yu Haoran would not only successfully break through to the martial warrior realm, but also directly advance to the high second grade martial warrior. In terms of cultivation, Yu Haoran had already surpassed him. With regard to Yu Haoran's progress, he felt powerless. At the same time, he also gave up on the idea of challenging Yu Haoran in the future. As for the black-clothed youth standing in front of Meng Fanwei, after hearing Yu Haoran announce his cultivation, he couldn't help but frown. However, his frown quickly smoothed out and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. Yu Haoran wasn't the kind of person who liked to stick a warm face to a cold butt. Since the black-clothed youth didn't take the initiative to greet him, he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. Therefore, he chatted with Meng Fanwei while waiting for the secret realm to open. The 100 Qi Gate had a secret realm that tempered the body. Although it could only be used for martial warriors, it could allow 20 people to use it at the same time. This could be considered as a compensation for having a disadvantage and a benefit. While waiting for the secret realm to reopen, he chatted with Meng Fanwei. As they chatted, Meng Fanwei suddenly mentioned the Blue Moon secret realm that would open in a month. The Blue Moon secret realm was a natural secret realm that was jointly developed by the 100 Qi Gate, Heart Moon Sect, Meteor Sect, and Ancient Town Sect. The so-called natural secret realm was an independent space formed by the fusion of the law of space and different law of space. Natural secret realms were of different sizes. The small secret realms might only be the size of a grain of rice. The large secret realms might even be larger than the entire Tianxian continent. According to what Yu Haoran knew, the demon god's ancient tomb was very likely to be a natural secret realm. It was a mysterious secret realm that might be larger than the Tianxian continent. The Blue Moon secret realm was located in a valley 700 miles away from the 100 Qi Gate. It was an unopened secret realm that was accidentally discovered by a few disciples of the Heart Moon sect during their training. Because the Heart Moon sect was only a third-rate sect, it was difficult for them to break the secret realm's restriction with their sect strength. Therefore, the Heart Moon sect secretly contacted the third-rate sects, the Meteor sect and Ancient Town sect, to work together to open the secret realm. However, no one knew that the Ancient Town sect's sect master, Zhao Ji, was actually the younger cousin of the 100 Qi Gate sect master. The reason why Zhao Ji was able to sit on the Ancient Town sect's sect master's seat with the cultivation of a peak 7th grade martial king was entirely because of the support from the 100 Qi Gate sect master. Zhao Ji knew the secret of the Blue Moon secret realm, which meant that the 100 Qi Gate also knew the secret of the secret realm. Therefore, after knowing that the 100 Qi Gate of the Blue Moon secret realm used their power to suppress others, not only did they directly participate in the breaking and opening of the secret realm's restriction, they also monopolized half of the secret realm's resources. The Blue Moon secret realm was only the most ordinary secret realm. Its size was equivalent to a kingdom. Moreover, due to the restriction of the secret realm's rules, the Blue Moon secret realm would only open once every 5 years. Every time it opened, only martial disciples and martial warriors could enter. If a cultivator whose cultivation surpassed the martial warrior realm entered, not only would they break the secret realm's rules and cause the entire Blue Moon secret realm to be destroyed, the intruder would also receive a backlash from the secret realm's rules and their soul would be destroyed. Therefore, the opening of the Blue Moon secret realm was not only a battle for cultivation resources, but also a trial for the disciples. It was also a cruel elimination competition. In his previous life, Yu Haoran had entered the Blue Moon secret realm once. However, because he was only a 4th grade martial disciple at that time, he was the disciple with the lowest cultivation that entered the secret realm. Therefore, he could only move around the outer area of the secret realm and had very little harvest. However, this time was different from his previous life, because not only was his cultivation at the peak of the 2nd grade martial warrior, his strength had also reached the early stage of the 5th grade martial warrior. He had the strength and ability to fight for any treasure within the Blue Moon Secret Realm. Moreover, Yu Haoran knew that after the Blue Moon Secret Realm opened this time, there would be 3 treasures that even peak Martial King experts would be moved by. Moreover, 2 of the 3 treasures would fall into the hands of his enemies from his previous life. Therefore, when the Blue Moon Secret Realm opened this time, not only would he seize all the precious treasures within the Secret Realm, he would also use the Secret Realm's special rules to eliminate his enemies that would threaten him in the future. Just as Yu Haoran was recalling all the information about the Blue Moon Secret Realm, the Secret Realm that had been in an open state suddenly flashed with a white light. Immediately after, a disciple at the peak of the 3rd grade martial warrior crawled out of the cave in a sorry state. Sigh. Patting the dust off his clothes, the disciple who was thrown out of the Secret Realm sighed and turned to leave the cave. Chapter 104. Achievement Hall. In front of the Secret Realm. Yu Shixiang, what's going on? Wu Zhengjun asked solemnly when he saw the disciples thrown out of the cave in a sorry state. The Secret Realm for tempering one's physical body uses the gravity technique unique to the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts. It uses the pressure of gravity to further stimulate the potential of a martial artist's physical body. After the Secret Realm opens, the gravity will continue to increase until you can no longer stand, sit, or even crawl. Then, you will be thrown out of the Secret Realm. The reason why they appeared in such a sorry state was because they couldn't withstand the increasing pressure of gravity. Yu Haoran reminded the 5th disciple who was crawling out of the cave. The blood essence emitted from his body was far stronger than the previous 4 disciples. Zhengjun, the longer you can withstand the pressure of gravity, the more your physical body's potential will be stimulated and the stronger the tempering effect will be. If you can withstand the strongest 10 times gravity in the Secret Realm, then your physical body will at least improve by a grade. Moreover, when you're thrown out of the cave, you won't be in such a sorry state like the others. Just as Yu Haoran was explaining the various effects of the Secret Realm to Wu Zhengjun, more than 10 disciples were thrown out of the cave one after another. After careful calculation, the 20 disciples who had entered the Secret Realm had all been thrown out of the Secret Realm. At this moment, the Achievement Hall disciple in charge of managing the Secret Realm spoke. According to the sect's rules, other than the new disciples who can use the Secret Realm once for free, the other disciples who want to use the Secret Realm only need to pay 5 sect contribution points and 3 9th-level 1st-grade spirit stones if they want to provide the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts. If they want the sect to provide the blood essence of bear-type exotic beasts, then they need to pay 10 sect contribution points and 5 9th-level 1st-grade spirit stones. Among the 20 disciples who wanted to enter the Secret Realm to temper their physical bodies, other than Yu Haoran, Wu Zhengjun, Meng Fanwei, and the black-clothed youth, the remaining 16 disciples were not using the Secret Realm for the first time. Therefore, they were already prepared. They took out the token and spirit stones that represented their identity as disciples and went through the procedures to enter the Secret Realm. Since they were new disciples, and it was their first time using the Secret Realm, Yu Haoran and the other 3 were at the back of the queue. When it was Yu Haoran and the other 3's turn, the Achievement Hall disciple solemnly ordered them. Zhao Xinyu, you go to the 5th room on the west side of the Secret Realm. The disciple of the Merit Palace instructed with a cold expression as he handed over a token with Shi Wu engraved on it to the black-clothed youth. After receiving the token, the black-clothed youth, Zhao Xinyu's face became gloomy. Of the veins on his left hand, token on the token on the ground floor as he held the token. Meng Fanwei, go to the 4th room on the west side of the Mystic Realm. He handed Meng Fanwei a token engraved with Shixi's name. Meng Fanwei, who didn't know that different rooms represented different effects, thanked the disciple while receiving the token. When it was Yu Haoran's turn, the originally cold and indifferent Achievement Hall disciple, nodded his head with a warm expression. "You, Howren, you go to the first room on the east side." "Thank you, senior brother." After receiving the token from the Achievement Hall disciple, Yu Howren expressed his gratitude with great satisfaction. In his previous life, he had used the secret realm to temper his physical body more than once. Therefore, he was very familiar with the internal structure of the secret realm. He knew that out of the 20 independent spaces formed by the secret realm's laws, 4 of them could perfectly display the power of the bear-type blood essence. He didn't expect that the Achievement Hall disciple would arrange for him to be in the best space. This way, he could better display the power of the 3 bear-type blood essences that his master had gifted him. "You're welcome." The Achievement Hall disciple continued to arrange for Yu Howren. "Wu Jingjun, go to the second room on the east side." As he stepped into the cave, the token in his hand emitted a warm red light. The red light enveloped Yu Howren, and a pushing force pushed him forward. Yu Howren didn't resist the pushing force produced by the token. He allowed the pushing force to push him forward. Soon, he arrived at an independent space. He placed the token in his hand on the light barrier of the independent space. Subsequently, the independent space split open, revealing a gap big enough for one person to pass through. Stepping into the space, Yu Howren sized up the space in front of him. He discovered that the shape of this space wasn't much different from the other spaces. However, he was very clear that the 4 independent spaces near the core of the magic tool, not only could they perfectly display the power of the bear-type blood essence, but they could also support the gravity technique, allowing his physical body to be better tempered. Although he hadn't used the best independent space in his previous life, he had learned about this kind of magic tool that was comparable to a secret realm in the weapon refining sect. He knew how to change the blood essence. Moreover, when Feng Qingyun gave him the blood essence of the bear-type blood essence, he had given him a record of how to change the blood essence. Therefore, he quickly found the device to store the bear-type blood essence. Using a special method, he took out the ordinary bear-type blood essence given by the sect and replaced it with the thick mountain bear's blood essence given by his master. Yu Howren stood in place, ready to welcome the activation of the magic tool. It didn't take long, only a short minute. As the device containing the bear-type blood essence completely disappeared, an aura that made one's heart tremble gradually enveloped him. Yu Howren was very familiar with this aura. He knew that this was the gravity technique in the thick mountain bear's blood essence that had been activated in the secret realm. Therefore, he temporarily suppressed the Yuan Li in his Dantian. He planned to use his physical body to resist the increasing pressure of the gravity. Double. When the aura pressed down on his body, Yu Howren carefully sensed it and found that it was only double the original gravity of the space. To Yu Howren, who had experienced the Reckless Bull Fist and the Stardow arts to strengthen his physical body, the pressure formed by double gravity didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Double. When the gravity in the space reached double, Yu Howren also didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure. Triple. When the gravity in the space reached triple, Yu Howren felt a little bit of pressure. However, this little bit of pressure still didn't have any effect on strengthening his physical body. Quadruple. When the gravity in the space reached quadruple, Yu Howren finally felt a little bit of heaviness. However, this heaviness also didn't have any effect on strengthening his physical body. Quintuple. When the gravity in the space reached quintuple, Yu Howren finally felt the power of gravity. At this moment, he couldn't straighten his body like before. Moreover, his head began to lower slightly. Sixfold. When the gravity in the space reached sixfold, Yu Howren began to clench his fists and the muscles on his body began to tighten. Sevenfold. When the gravity in the space reached sevenfold, not only did Yu Howren's body bend slightly, but his originally straight legs also began to tremble uncontrollably. Eightfold. When the gravity in the space reached eightfold, not only did Yu Howren's forehead drip with sweat like raindrops, but his breathing became heavier and heavier. Even the veins on his temples began to protrude. Ninefold. When the gravity in the space reached ninefold, Howard directly bent his knees and sat down cross-legged. With the strength of his physical body, it wasn't that he couldn't continue to hold on. However, the result of holding on forcefully would cause damage to his legs and internal organs. This was not in line with his original intention of using gravity to strengthen his physical body. Chapter 105. Achievement Hall in the Secret Realm. Just as Howard began to withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space, outside the cave, disciples began to be thrown out of the secret realm in a crawling posture. The first disciple to be thrown out of the secret realm realized that he was the first person who could not withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space in the secret realm. He immediately lowered his head in shame and turned around to leave. Not long after this disciple left, another 3 disciples were forcefully thrown out of the cave because they could not withstand the fivefold gravity of the independent space in the secret realm. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm reached sixfold, 13 disciples were thrown out of the cave in succession. One of them was Meng Fanwei, who had just entered the sect. Although his posture outside the cave was a little embarrassing, it was different from the other disciples who were thrown out of the secret realm. Meng Danwei was not depressed at all. Instead, his face revealed a look of excitement. Because this was the first time he had used the secret realm to temper himself, his physical body had been greatly improved, so he had temporarily forgotten the word shame. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm reached sevenfold, Zhao Xinyu also appeared outside the cave in a crawling posture. Zhao Xinyu got up and cleaned the dust on his chest. He did not turn around and leave the secret realm like the other disciples. Instead, he stood in the same place and stared at the cave entrance, as if he was waiting for someone to appear in the same way. Unfortunately, when the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm increased to eightfold, the person he was waiting for still did not appear. When the gravity of the independent space in the secret realm increased to eightfold and was halfway through the process, a young man in a green robe with a tyrannical aura appeared outside the cave with his hands on the ground. The appearance of a young man in green shocked the people guarding outside the cave. This was because he was the first disciple who was not thrown out of the cave with his chest on the ground. Moreover, he was able to withstand the eightfold gravity. This was enough to show how strong the young man in green's body was and how outstanding his perseverance was. Looking at Wu Jingjun, who was supporting himself with his hands on the ground, Zhao Xinyu's face instantly darkened. If his performance was not as good as Yu Haoran, although he was unwilling, it was not unacceptable. After all, Yu Haoran was stronger than him in all aspects. It was normal for him to be outstanding. However, he had lost to Wu Jingjun, who was not as good as him in terms of cultivation, strength, talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance. This was a huge blow to Zhao Xinyu's mentality. At this moment, there was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes as he looked at Wu Jingjun. Fortunately, he quickly controlled his mentality and did not let anyone notice his abnormality. Since his chest didn't touch the ground, there wasn't any dust on it. After getting up, Wu Zhangjun dusted his hands and walked directly to a huge rock. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to experience the enlightenment he had gained from using gravity to temper his body in the independent space of the secret realm. When the gravity in the independent space reached the limit of 9 times, Yu Haoran felt that his body was close to the limit, even though he was sitting cross-legged to resist the pressure. There were 2 ways to get out of this predicament. The first way was to mobilize the Yuan power in his Dantian and use the Yuan power in conjunction with the body to resist the huge pressure formed by the gravity. This was the method used by most disciples who used the secret space to temper their bodies. However, there was a disadvantage to using this method. It would weaken the pressure of the gravity on the body and could not achieve the most perfect tempering effect. Therefore, Yu Haoran would not consider using this method for the time being. The second method, on the other hand, was to continuously stimulate the body's potential and increase the strength of the body to resist the increasing gravity. However, this method also had a disadvantage. If the body could not withstand the pressure of the gravity, it would cause serious injuries to the body. Of course, there were advantages to this method, although there was a possibility of serious injuries. If the speed at which the potential was stimulated could resist the pressure of the gravity, then the body would be perfectly tempered. This was the method Yu Haoran chose. At the same time, he relied on his astonishing willpower to endure the intense pain caused by the gravity pressing down on his body. On the other hand, he used the pressure of the gravity to stimulate the potential of his body and increase the strength of his body. Under this pressure, stimulation, and increase in strength, his body, which had just reached the middle stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, quickly broke through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior. Just as his body broke through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, the pressure that was originally close to the limit relaxed a lot. However, this relaxed feeling did not last for long. As the gravity in the independent space increased by 10 times, a heavenly pressure acted on Yu Haoran's body, causing him to almost fall down. If he did not use his arms to support himself, he would have been thrown out of the cave like the other disciples who were thrown out of their magic tools. 10 times the gravity. His body, which had just broken through to the late stage of a fifth-grade martial warrior, was already unable to withstand such a terrifying pressure. At this moment, Yu Haoran not only found it difficult to breathe, but his entire body could not help but tremble under the pressure of the gravity. Yu Haoran knew that 10 times the gravity of the independent space had already reached the limit of what he could endure. Now, he had two choices. Either he could leave the independent space with his hands on the ground and end this tempering of his body, or he could continue to stimulate the strength of his body in this life and death situation, forcing himself to continue increasing the grade of his body. Yu Haoran didn't think too much about the second choice. He resisted the pressure of gravity on his body and straightened his body bit by bit. He planned to continue using his cross-legged posture to resist the pressure of gravity. Just as Yu Haoran was about to go all out to resist the pressure of 10 times the gravity, outside the cave, there were not only the disciples of the Achievement Hall, but also Meng Fanwei, Zhao Xinyu, Wu Jingjun, and the others. At this moment, there were several hundred people gathered outside the cave. Among them, there were disciples who wanted to use the secret realm to temper their bodies, as well as inner disciples and elite disciples who had come to the Achievement Hall to exchange resources and complete missions. When these people found out that there was someone who could withstand the pressure of 9 times the normal pressure in the secret realm, they all put down whatever they were doing and rushed to the secret realm. They want to see who this genius, who could withstand the pressure of 9 times the normal pressure was. If it was a genius from an ordinary sect, then they would inform the higher-ups of their sect to make promises and rope him in. If it was a genius from the strongest sect, then they would warn their fellow disciples not to provoke him in the future. This was because ever since the 100 Qi Gate obtained a secret realm that could temper the body, no less than several 100,000 people had used it. Chapter 106. Achievement Hall, in front of the secret territory. In the 100 Qi Gate, other than using the talent stone to determine a disciple's talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance, the ability to withstand the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory was also an important method to determine a disciple's status and identity. To be able to withstand 5 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could only be considered an ordinary disciple. Such a disciple had no value in nurturing, and the sect and faction would not waste too many resources on him. To be able to withstand 6 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered a disciple under investigation. Such a disciple could be paid some attention, but would not have too much hope. Similarly, they would not be given too many resources. To be able to withstand 7 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered an outstanding disciple. Such a disciple could be paid more attention and given a certain amount of care and treatment. In the future, he might be able to become a mid-level disciple of the sect. To be able to withstand 8 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered an elite disciple. Such a disciple would not only receive important attention, but would also be given a certain amount of care and treatment. Furthermore, the upper echelons of the sect would send out specialized experts to guide and inspect them from time to time. To be able to withstand 9 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, one could be considered a core disciple. Such a disciple would not only receive important attention, but would also be given a certain amount of care and treatment. Furthermore, he would be able to choose a different faction freely. At the same time, the faction he chose would not have the right to reject him. Of course, no faction would be willing to reject such a genius disciple. As for the 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, ever since the 100 Chi Gate had obtained the secret territory and officially used it, no one had been able to withstand 9 times the gravity, let alone 10 times the gravity. As a result, the ancestors of the 100 Chi Gate had never considered how a disciple who could withstand 10 times the gravity should be taken care of, nurtured, and valued. It was only at the end of the rules regarding the training of the secret territory that there was a reward for clearing the secret territory. Therefore, when they saw that Yuhaoran was still not expelled from the independent space of the secret territory, even though the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory had increased by 10 times, how could the crowd not be shocked? This ninth junior brother is too ferocious. Huang Zonghua and Pan Yuhai, who had just consolidated their cultivation of martial ancestor, want to try their luck at the achievement hall. They wanted to see if they could receive a mission that was suitable for their cultivation and had a good reward. When they heard that Yu Haoran and Wu Jingjun had used the secret territory to temper their bodies and that Yu Haoran had already reached 9 times the gravity of the gravity, the two of them hurriedly came to spectate. Huang Zhan's sect's disciple, Huang Zhan of martial ancestors' disciple, of the martial of heavens of the secret territory of the secret territory. One must know that when he was a martial warrior, he entered the hidden realm 3 times to temper his body. The last time was when he entered the hidden realm as a peak 6th grade martial warrior. However, he was only able to endure up to 8 times the normal gravity before he was forced to retreat. Today, Yu Haoran was actually able to endure 10 times the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory just by relying on his cultivation of the martial warrior realm. How could he not be shocked by Yu Haoran's perseverance and the strength of his body? Actually, what Huang Zonghua didn't know was that when he had endured the gravity of the independent space of the secret territory, he had only used the blood essence of a 9th level 1st rank, the most common of bear-type exotic beasts. Yu Haoran, on the other hand, had used the blood essence of a 9th level 9th rank exotic beast, the king of the thick mountain bear. The difference between the 2 types of blood essences was at least several times stronger. Furthermore, Yu Haoran had not used a single trace of Yuan Li all the way to 10 times the gravity. He had been relying on his strong body to resist the pressure of the gravity. If he knew about this, shock wouldn't be enough to describe his current feelings. Looking at the silent cave and hearing the discussions of the crowd, Zhao Sinyu's face was so gloomy that it seemed as if it could drip water. He never would have thought that not only was Yu Haoran's perseverance astonishing, but his body was also so strong that he could actually endure 10 times the gravity. Based on the strength of his body and his cultivation of an advanced 2nd grade martial warrior, perhaps even a peak 4th grade martial warrior or early 5th grade martial warrior might not be his match. Thinking of this, Zhao Sinyu didn't feel despair. Instead, he felt a sense of crisis. A crisis that could affect whether or not he could smoothly become the gate master of the 100 Chi Gate in the future. Therefore, under the pressure of this crisis, Zhao Sinyu also developed a strong, killing intent towards Yu Haoran. This time, he didn't adjust his mentality very well. The killing intent lasted for 3 seconds. Wu Jingjun, who had activated his bloodthirsty physique, was especially sensitive to killing intent. Moreover, he was very close to Zhao Xinyu. Therefore, he could clearly feel the strong killing intent emitted from Zhao Xinyu's body. The reason why Zhao Xinyu's killing intent was obvious. It must be because of Yu Haoran's outstanding performance in the secret realm. Thinking that Zhao Xinyu actually wanted to kill Yu Haoran, Wu Zhengjuan's originally clear eyes flashed with a frightening red light. In the secret realm, in an independent space, under the pressure of 10 times the gravity, Yu Haoran was almost pressed down. Right now, he was only using his arms to support himself, barely resisting the terrifying pressure of 10 times the gravity. The tempering of his mental state in his previous life allowed him to quickly break free from the pressure of 10 times the gravity. As he continued to stimulate the potential of his body, he used his tenacious perseverance to slowly straighten his body. Yu Haoran's actions seemed to have angered the consciousness of the secret realm. Originally, it was only 10 times the gravity of the entire space, but in an instant, it gathered on Yu Haoran's body. This caused his half-straightened body to collapse once again. Furthermore, this collapse caused his arms to twist and his chest to almost touch the ground. This also meant that he was beginning to suffer the backlash of the gravity. The pain caused by the twisting of his arms was similar to the pain caused by the pressure of gravity on his body. Therefore, Yu Haoran's consciousness was not affected by the twisting of his arms. Feeling the pressure of the entire space on his body, Yu Haoran knew that with the strength of his body, it would be difficult for him to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. At the same time, he finally understood why among the many disciples in the sect who used the secret realm, no one was able to persevere to the end, even if they were exceptional geniuses. Perhaps it was directly related to the final pressure of the independent space. If he continued to persevere, not only would his body not be strengthened, he would also suffer serious injuries. Therefore, Yu Haoran planned to mobilize the elemental energy in his energy center and combine it with the strength of his body to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. However, just as Yu Haoran was about to mobilize the elemental energy in his energy center, a surge of energy suddenly emerged from his blood. The surging energy quickly merged with his bones, causing his twisted arms to instantly return to their original state. It took less than 1/5 of the energy to heal his twisted arms. The remaining energy continued to merge into his meridians, organs, and body. The remaining energy finally converged into his dantian. After receiving the support of this powerful energy, Yu Haoran immediately felt the strength of his body break through from the late stage of a 5th-grade martial warrior to the early stage of a 6th-grade martial warrior. At the same time, the late stage of a 2nd-grade martial warrior also broke through to the early stage of a 3rd-grade martial warrior under the dual effects of the energy and pressure. More importantly, the breakthrough in his cultivation stimulated his body. His body, which had just broken through to the early stage of a 6th-grade martial warrior, instantly rose to the middle stage of a 6th-grade martial warrior. The body of a middle stage of a 6th-grade martial warrior was able to withstand 10 times the gravity at one point. Chapter 107. Achievement Hall, Secret Territory. Fouling, the energy that appeared in my blood, could be the earth ginseng I consumed yesterday? Yu Haoran asked. Since his rebirth, the only heavenly treasures he had consumed were the blood ginseng and the earth ginseng. Considering that the blood ginseng targeted Yuan Li and the earth ginseng targeted the body, he guessed that the energy came from the earth ginseng. That's right. It is the energy of the earth ginseng in your blood that hasn't been completely refined. Fouling's answer confirmed Yu Haoran's guess. Actually, if you didn't use the 10 times gravity artifact to pressure your body, causing your body to reach its limit, you wouldn't have been able to activate the residual energy of the earth ginseng in your blood. Moreover, when you broke through to the martial master realm, the residual energy of the earth ginseng would be expelled from your body along with the impurities produced during the breakthrough. However, what I didn't expect was that not only was your willpower outstanding, but your courage was also astonishing. You actually dared to force yourself into a desperate situation during a mere tempering of your body. Now, not only has your body reached the middle of the 6th grade martial warrior, but your cultivation is only at the early 3rd grade martial warrior. There is a difference of 3 grades between your body and your cultivation. Yu Haoran, I am now very much looking forward to seeing if you can break through the 10th grade martial warrior realm like the martial disciple realm when your cultivation reaches the peak of the 9th grade martial warrior realm. In response to Thaling's exclamation, Yu Haoran's heart was as calm as still water. In his previous life, in order to increase his strength, he risked his life 5 to 6 times out of 10. He was already used to forcing himself into desperate situations and was also used to maintaining a clear mind in desperate situations. The desperate situation that Thaling mentioned just now, in his opinion, was just a very normal cultivation in his previous life. It couldn't be considered a desperate situation at all. Perhaps it sensed Yu Haoran's breakthrough. Perhaps it also knew that the 10 times gravity could no longer threaten Yu Haoran. So the 10 times gravity on Yu Haoran's body gradually weakened until it finally disappeared. Looking at the switch to place the blood essence, Yu Haoran pondered for a long time. In the end, he gave up on the idea of replacing the blood essence of the Black Flame Bear. It wasn't that he didn't want to use the blood essence of the rank 8 3rd grade Black Flame Bear to increase the grade of his body, but the opening of the body-tempering mystic realm required a disciple of the Merit Hall to personally open it. He would need to go outside to complete the procedures. As a disciple of the 100 Chi Gate in his previous life, he knew what it meant to withstand different times of gravity. He was also very clear about the commotion caused by enduring 10 times the gravity. Presumably, he had already attracted the attention of some people outside. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he could only temporarily give up on the plan to continue tempering his body. Yu Haoran tidied up his clothes, which were a little messy due to the sudden arrival of the 10 times gravity. He reached out and picked up the token with the word Dong E engraved on it. He stuck the token on the space wall and then left the mystic realm through the gap created by the token. Although he knew that he had withstood 10 times the gravity and would attract the attention of some people, he didn't expect that there would be so many people gathered outside the mystic realm. This gave Yu Haoran, who had just walked out of the cave, a fright. Fortunately, he had experienced many big scenes in his previous life. In the face of hundreds of onlookers, he quickly adjusted his state of mind. He handed the token in his hand to the Merit Hall disciple who was still in a daze. He then gave Wu Zhengjun a look. Then, he immediately used the Gale Steps and left the secret realm and the Hall of Merit before anyone could react. 6th Junior Brother, let's go back to Qingyun Peak first. Huang Zhenhua didn't react until Yu Haoran disappeared in front of the mystic realm. When he thought about how Yu Haoran had not only withstood 10 times the gravity in the mystic realm, but also walked out of the mystic realm unscathed, Huang Zhenhua suddenly thought of a rule in the sect. It was a reward for passing a mystic realm that trained one's physical body. Therefore, he didn't have time to go to the Merit Hall to find a suitable mission for himself. He wanted to immediately inform eldest senior brother and then discuss whether to receive the reward for passing the mystic realm. Okay. Although Pan Yuhai didn't immediately think of the reward for passing the mystic realm like Huang Zhenhua, he was also shocked and didn't have the heart to check the mission. Therefore, he subconsciously agreed to Huang Zhenghua's suggestion. Although there weren't many people who thought of the reward for passing the mystic realm like Huang Zhenhua, there was still a portion of them. When this portion of people thought of the huge amount of rewards, their eyes suddenly surged with uncontrollable greed. A portion of people who knew that the person who had just passed the mystic realm was Yu Haoran quietly left the mystic realm and waited quietly in some hidden corners leading to the Merit Hall. The portion of people who didn't know who Yu Haoran was hurriedly asked the disciples of the Merit Hall. When they found out about Yu Haoran's background, they also waited quietly like the people who had been waiting in the hidden corners earlier. Yu Shi Xiang. How strong is the pressure of 10 times the gravity? How effective is the tempering of the body? After leaving the Merit Hall, Yu Haoran waited for a while at the foot of a mountain until Wu Xingjun arrived. He then used wind walk to bring him back to Qingyun Peak. Wu Xingjun, who was being brought along, asked with a hint of envy in his voice. Xingjun, my situation is different from yours. Yu Haoran knew what Wu Xingjun meant. He wanted to determine the limit of his endurance when he entered the mystic realm based on his description of the power of 10 times the gravity. However, considering that the blood essence he was using was different from the blood essence provided by the sect, the pressure in the mystic realm was also different. In order to prevent Wu Xingjun from making a mistake and hurting himself, Yu Haoran told him the truth. Yu Shi Xiao, I only have one word to describe you: admiration. When Wu Xingjun heard that Yu Haoran had used the blood essence of a bear-type exotic beast, which he had specially prepared beforehand, and that the gravity created by the independent space of the secret realm was several times stronger than the gravity he had withstood earlier, he only had one word in his heart: admiration. Xingjun, when we go back today, you should go into seclusion to comprehend and see if you can increase your cultivation with the help of the Origin Nurturing Pill. Tomorrow morning, I will find you and bring you to the depths of the mountain range to train. Right now, his cultivation was already at the early 3rd grade martial warrior, and his body was at the mid-6th grade martial warrior. It would be difficult for him to continue increasing his cultivation and body grade in a short period of time. Otherwise, it would cause his foundation to waver. Therefore, he wanted to go to the depths of the mountain range immediately and rely on the battles with the exotic beasts to completely consolidate his cultivation after his breakthrough. After that, he would think of a way to continue improving his cultivation and the grade of his body. I understand. After replying, Wu Xingjun became silent. After sending Wu Xingjun back to the Veiled Dragon Pavilion, Yu Haoran returned to his own Hidden Moon Pavilion. However, when he arrived at his courtyard, he unexpectedly saw his eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu, second senior brother Lu Guangwei, fifth senior brother Huang Zonghua, and sixth senior brother Pan Yuhai. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.